And while I have been the face, I want to go and talk about this team of people who have made this happen, who have kept me sane, and have been doing so much of the work. So that was our planning committee, and we want to give a thank you to our sponsors. So we're going to go one more slide. We got a lot of sponsors. Y'all's support has been phenomenal. And we are very happy. So our main sponsors are Campus Vote Project and Texas Women's University's Jane Nelson Institute. Our Democratic Champion sponsors included the organizations of All In. Our Democratic Engagement sponsors are the Andrew Goodman Foundation, Common Cause, League of Women Voters of Texas, and Next Gen America. We also have Student Voter Summit Supporter, which is Move Texas. And also our day one lunch co-sponsored Pizza to the Polls. Gives you a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge of some of what we will be having for lunch. And that will be in the Sam Houston building later, and we will help you get there. Just some quick housekeeping is we also want to let people, the people in attendance know that we are asking you to wear your name tags. What's your name? Hopefully, like your org and the school you're representing. I understand you might have to abbreviate, which is fine. Also, for our virtual watchers, if you can rename yourselves, please rename yourself with your name as well as the organization you're representing virtually. Y'all, we are doing a true hybrid experience, so we have people watching from throughout the state, we have people in person, and we have people that are actually still traveling because my phone keeps buzzing, so I know folks are finding their way. So we are really happy about that. And also, virtual folks, feel free to use the chat, talk to each other. The people here, I want you to talk to each other, get to know each other, network, meet friends that are in the space. And I also encourage those watching virtually to do the same. So to give you a break from the sound of my voice for a moment, I would like to introduce Cassie. Oh, real quick, if you are a volunteer or part of the CVP staff or volunteers, raise your hand. I'm not gonna make you stand up, you don't want to, but raise your hand and wave it around, raise it high. I'm telling you, these folks are everything right now, okay? So I just want to give a little shout out to that. But I'm gonna introduce Cassie for our land acknowledgement. We're gonna go one more slide for that. And as she walks up, I want to just say that she's our curriculum and research manager for Campus Vote Project. She is the one that does so many things, so much programming nationally for like our fellows and beyond, our research. I mean, I could go on and on about Cassie. Cassie also lives right here and also attended UT Austin. And I'm gonna have her, she's a key member of our team, and today is also serving as our press liaison. So we have any press that are already here or watching virtually. She is the person that you will be connected to. So without further ado, let's do a round of applause and welcome her to the stage.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It is my privilege to do our land acknowledgement for you today. For those of you who don't know, we do land acknowledgements in order to acknowledge the lands that we're on and who once and still in different cases lives on this land. So here in Central Texas, we are going to do from the ancestral lands of the Comandos, the Tonkawa, the Apache, the Coahuilteca, and the Comanche people. And so that's a lot of words. We're acknowledging something, but what are we actually doing in this space? And one of the really cool things that Campus Vote Project has been working on is that we have a student advisory board, and on our student advisory board, we now have a role very specifically for Indigenous, Native, and tribal students. That started last fall with the amazing Cameron Yonchuk, who is a University of Oklahoma student, and she's done research on student voting among students, tribal students, and both U.S. Tribal elections. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to Cameron. I can get you all hooked up. She is in our Student Voting Network Slack. If you're not there, come talk to me at some point. I can introduce you to that. But we are also actually in the process of bringing on our next year of student advisory board members. And so we are bringing on a new student in this role, and I'm very excited about that.
All right, thank you so much. So next up, we'll go one more slide. I'm gonna pause because we have a very short welcome message. We have a very short welcome message from our Deputy Director of Campus Vote Project, Rahila Ahmed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rahila Ahmed, and I'm the Deputy Director of Fair Election Center's Campus Vote Project. I want to thank you all, faculty, staff, volunteers, and students, for coming to be a part of the 2022 Texas Voting Summit.
Just 1 second.
I hope that as you spend your time here today, you feel inspired and you feel the importance of
I mentioned one thing, another technical difficulty.
So like I said, what you're gonna hear from us, because this is what we do, right? Again, I'm gonna hear from our Deputy Director, and she was the one to give you a really encouraging message. After that, I will come right back to the stage and we will go over our day one agenda before we go over and start a really fun little almost warm-up kickoff game that we're gonna play next. With that, I'm gonna stop talking again.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rahila Ahmed, and I'm the Deputy Director of Fair Election Center's Campus Vote Project. I want to thank you all, faculty, staff, volunteers, and students, for coming to be a part of the 2022 Texas Voting Summit. I hope that as you spend your time here today, you feel inspired and you feel the significance and the importance of the work that we are doing, both collectively and individually. At Campus Vote Project, we prioritize institutionalizing voting on college campuses across the country by supporting administrators and students in their plight to register students to vote and actually voting. But this goal would not be possible if not for all of y'all's hard work. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for remaining hopeful. And we hope you enjoy this summit. Take it all in, folks. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. I'm going to speak a little louder so that make sure our virtual attendees can hear me well. But we're going to go to the next slide so I can give you a quick overview of today. And you all should also have that virtual attendees. You should have emailed this information. Those in attendance, if you look inside your folder, you also should have a printout of today's agenda. But for day one, just to let you know, we're about to kick off with a Kahoot, talking about Texas election laws. It's really a little trivia in general. It's going to be short. It's going to be a good warm-up, and meanwhile, you will get instructions. But if you have a handy-dandy handheld device with you, including our virtual attendees, we will talk about that. It will be very helpful to help you participate in a really fun game. It'll kind of be your basic game controller in a way. You'll see.
Okay, going. Sorry.
So then we will have a presentation. So we will have a presentation about civil discourse, followed by our keynote today, which is going to be a panel of student leaders telling you about their experiences. We will then have lunch and Capitol visit, which is really, I'm encouraging you strongly to take advantage of this. We're going to have our own tour of the Capitol. Then we have a virtual presentation about on-campus polling locations and their importance, and then a presentation about Unsolved data, how it works, looking at it, breaking it down, and then we get to close for today. Get some rest, look around, explore Austin a bit before we see bright and early, tomorrow at a different location than today, but you will get reminders of that at the end as well, so no one forgets where they're going. So There are a few don't forget. Please make sure you check in at the front. If you did not do that, again, just there is time. We have a break. We go to lunch. Just check in so that we know you are here. Again, people online, it's helpful if you change your name just so that we can look at that later and kind of just see who is here with us. Additionally, there's some information about the Capitol tour. Virtual attendees, let us know in the chat if you have any technical difficulties. We do have a chat monitor that will be seeing and hearing. They're the ones that told me to talk louder. So please make sure you let us know virtually as well as in person if you have any needs, any questions, any concerns. Lunch will be in the Sam Houston building. Again, you all that are present will get instructions and support on finding that location. It's not far, but we will get you there. Learn, make connections, and have fun, and follow us on Instagram, Texas Voting Summit and Campus Vote Project. We would love to connect with you. You can see what we're doing, and you can share the things you are doing. So we're gonna go to the next slide, and I get to introduce Eugenia Adobe, which is gonna make me very, very happy. It's already smiling, but I can see her right now. Eugenia is a junior double majoring in political science and history with a minor in Spanish at Southwestern University. She is passionate about the intersection between civic engagement, equity, and inclusion, and wants to create spaces where everyone feels heard and respected. Before becoming our national programming intern with Campus Vote Project, Eugenia previously served as a democracy fellow with us. She has been recognized as a 2021 Hatton W. Sumner Scholar for her dedication to civic engagement, and also works as the student director of peace building in the Office of Diversity Education on her campus. Everyone, please welcome her up so she can get us started with our meeting.
I wish I could have Bianca just follow me around and announce me like that everywhere I go. If you could take out your phones, or laptops, whatever you've got with you, and go to group.it, or if you already have the group app, that's cute for you. You can do that too. And then just use that game pin up at the top to join. And we're gonna do a little speed round of Texas election law trivia. And we're also, the winner is going to get a Civic t-shirt. So you want to make sure that you put in your actual name so we can find you at some point to get that to go. Okay, if you're not already in, then please jump in. Okay, maybe we go now before we lose anyone else. Okay. Okay, literally 5 more seconds for that to start.
You have 5 seconds.
Okay. Oh. Okay, now.
Okay.
Okay, fabulous. I have not seen any of these questions. We're going to find out together. It's so fun for us. Okay, in what year did Texas approve the 26th Amendment, which extended the right to vote to people 18 and up?
Let's go.
You guys are quick. Okay, not bad. Okay, we can go to our next one. Okay, true or false? Most people in Texas jails, not prison, are still eligible to vote. It's true. The rumors are true, you heard it here first. Or hopefully you heard it somewhere else, but anyway, next one. Okay, we've got a little movement on the scoreboard. I love that for us. Okay, what is the voting age population? Our options are the number of people age 18 and over, the state's population of citizens overall, the number of people eligible to vote, or the number of registered voters. The number of people age 18 and over. Okay. Good competition on the scoreboard. I love to see it. And Emily is climbing. Very nice. Okay. Anyone can register another person to vote. True or false? Oh, okay. False. Yes. Okay. Let's see. What are the voter ID requirements in Texas? When voting, you can use your school ID. When voting, you don't need an ID. When voting, you must present an acceptable form of photo ID. When voting, you must present your social security card. This one, I love that for us. When voting, you must present an acceptable form of photo ID, which does not include school ID. So I love that for all of us college students. Okay, Jameson, climbing, love to see it. True or false? In Texas, you can register to vote online. This is excellent clip artwork here. False. Okay, we've got some movement. I feel like good. So can you update your voter registration on votetexas.gov? You can. Oh, I guess Jason T doesn't know about this, so sorry. Okay, persons convicted of a felony in Texas may register to vote again at which time? Upon release from incarceration, after completing a period of 5 years or probation, after serving their sentence, and completing probation or parole, or never. Yes, so after serving their sentence and completing probation or parole. Okay, nice. 9 of 9, this is the last one. How long prior to an election must you register in order to be eligible to vote? Yes. Nice. Okay, so almost everyone got it. 30 days prior to the election. So let's see who our winner is. In third place, Kel, very nice. Number 2, Emily. Is that Dr. Center? Sorry, Dr. Center. So sorry. everyone. Does it know why? You're virtual. Okay, we will find you and provide you with a celebration shirt somehow. I can get it anyway. Hopefully we'll find you goodbye. Okay, so thank you all so much for playing along. That was fabulous. I am pleased to introduce our next presenter. She is our speaker, Dr. Sonny Reichoff. She earned her PhD in political science from Washington State University in 2015. Her research focuses on political behavior, public opinion, and political communication. At Texas A&M Corpus Christi, she teaches classes on public opinion, media and politics, campaigns and elections, political parties, American politics, Texas politics, and research methods. Dr. Reichoff is passionate about political engagement in a respectful and depolarizing manner. She is also the faculty advisor of the Political Science Club and mentor of several distinguished students who serve as democracy fellows at the Island University. And together they work towards increasing civic awareness and community engagement among students. So please help me welcome Dr. Reichoff.
Thank you for the great introduction. Good morning, everyone. I am very honored to open the discussion on anything and everything that we can do on our campuses. And instead of talking about voting per se, I'm going to talk about civil discourse. So yeah, let's start with the opening. We don't like to talk to one another, especially if we don't agree, right? So how can we actually break that controversy? How can we actually bring people together and have a better understanding and engage more with one another? So I am doing some research on this topic with students on campus, in the classroom, and on campus-wide, in campus-wide setting. And this is my main question, is how to bring civil discussion to college campuses and how effective can it be? In many university missions, and probably in most of your universities as well, you can read their vision and mission statement, and then they're saying, oh, we are trying to engage our students, prepare them for the real world, make them lifelong learners or civic, engaged, global citizens. But what does that mean? And what does the university actually actively do towards that? In Texas, we all need to take an intro to American government and state and local government, which is usually translated into Texas government. But is that enough? The workforce, after you are graduating, is expecting you to be open-minded, to be flexible, to have some critical thinking skills, to be able to connect with others in a social setting and be emotionally prepared. And so they don't expect you to get into a fight or to get into a word fight even with others that you might not agree with. They expect you to be able to work with one another in groups and talk about things that you are disagreeing on. Now, studies show, on the next slide please, that political socialization studies show that attitudes are not yet fixed in early adulthood. And so the traditional student, and I know that we are really going away from that very traditional look that after high school you're immediately enrolling into college. But people in 18, 19, 20, in their adolescence, their political opinions are not completely firm yet. What you experience on a college campus with others, with your peers, is therefore really important because it's still shaping your view of the world as well. When we have these discussions with others that we might not agree with, like today we're all together, right? That we agree that voter engagement is important. But what about people that go about it in a different way? Studies show that in those conversations, we actually increase our tolerance, we increase our empathy, we increase our understanding, and we come to a more nuanced understanding of the world. Discussing politics helps. We know that, right? That's why we're here. We're not afraid to do that. But we probably will learn over the day, like today and tomorrow as well, that it's not that easy to accomplish. So if all this works, why are we then still facing so many obstacles? Next slide, please. We don't like it. We don't like conflict. How many of you have been in giant lecture halls with like 100, 200 students? Few. So at our campus, we have those intro classes to political science that are mandatory with 200 students together. People are scared. They don't want to speak up. They are reluctant to voice their opinions because they are afraid to be judged by their peers. It's not so much that the professor's authority is scary, luckily you're beyond that, but that the peers are actually very intimidating. And so we are not able or willing or daring to speak up. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because you are the ones that do, right? And we need to foster that. But overall, as I mentioned, you probably also experienced these obstacles when trying to talk to others, trying to get them registered to vote, or to just even bring up the topic of politics. Studies show that politics actually is the most controversial according to students. That's the one topic that they really don't want to talk about. And so as political scientists, as myself, I am here to break that barrier. I want students to feel okay to talk about these things, especially because it is affecting us every single day. So what can we do? We can increase civil discourse. And this can happen in the classroom and outside of the classroom as well. And civil discourse, I'm just giving you a list here of what it is and what it's not. It's truthful. It doesn't mean that it's always right, that it's always correct, but it's truthful because we're talking about people's heartfelt opinions and people's attitudes and views towards politics. It's productive. It's audience-based. And so instead of giving the focus to the person that's talking, we're actually focusing on the people that are listening. Active listening is also one of those skills that contributes to civil discourse. You don't always have to speak up and be the first one to say something. But when people do speak, they have their own responsibility. And so it's not about playing it on the person, like, oh, you're wrong because, that's like, I respect your opinion, but here's where I disagree. It's not politeness. It's not what you sometimes hear in the media, the political correctness. It's not an exercise in martyrdom, right? It's not about throwing yourself in front of the classroom or in front of the lines, trying to get people to engage actively. It is really about truth seeking. It's not formative. It's actually meant to be evaluative as well. What do we learn from this? And most of the time in civil discourse, we don't come to a solution because that's not the goal. The goal is to understand where we come from better instead of trying to come to a fix or to a solution. There's this wonderful organization that I collaborate with on our campus. It's the Braver Angels organization. They're a nonprofit, they're nonpartisan, and they are experts in debating. And even though we still call it debating, it's really more a discussion. And with their help, I've been able to introduce that to our campus as well. And they are active, I know, in multiple campuses in Texas as well, and all over the country. And they are promoting this collective exercise and seeking truth, right? Seeking that thoughtfulness. Braver Angels debates are not this golden key, right? Anybody who has these tools can host any of these debates. Anybody that understands the mechanics of creating civil discourse can implement this. You don't have to be connected with them in order to have access to this. But debates, they are organized by this organization. They have a specific process. It's a light parliamentary style. And the only thing that is according to the parliamentary style of debating or discussing is that there will be somebody arguing in favor of a specific statement and then somebody arguing against. And it goes in affirmative, negative, negative. Because what we often face in the classroom or in the breezeways or in the hallways on campus is that if one person speaks, people that agree with that collectively say, yes, I support that. And the person that doesn't feels themselves become smaller and smaller and less likely to speak up. Because it seems that there's a majority of people in one point of view. Whereas most often, we're very much 50-50. And so switching that on and off to have that discussion with the affirmative and the negative and keeping it with the speaker itself, like this is my opinion, is because this is the reason why I think these things. And somebody's arguing against and so forth. There's also somebody who keeps, a sort of control over the situation, making sure that people are respectful. We're not talking to one another as in, hey, you made that point. No, it is Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, the previous speaker made this argument and I wonder how they think about this particular case. To take the personal out of it as well. Most of these debates focus on very controversial issues. It seems almost impossible to talk about things such as gun restriction or gun laws, abortion, yes, no, freedom of speech, about COVID, mandating COVID vaccines. It's like, don't go there, right? That's too political, but it can be done. Go ahead, Sarah. So in addition to this collective debate in the parliamentary style, people can bring into the classroom what we call single issue exchanges. We have one topic and we have specific questions that people are answering to. So it's not so much having one statement or resolution that we need to argue in favor or against, but just having an open conversation about this topic based on pre-formatted questions. I did this in my classroom, and sure, they're political science majors, but they were not feeling it in the beginning of the semester. I was like, this is gonna be great. And they're like, yes, no way. And we had 20 students, I had 20 students in my classroom. And sometimes a smaller group increases conversation, and sometimes it's actually more intimidating because we get to know each other personally. And I trained them. I said, this is what we're going to do. We have a moderator. We're going through the moderator. We're not going to say or point you or just talk about the previous speaker, the person who asked the question, they. We had deep discussions for 75 minutes each week. It was half of the class. And at first, they hated it. Everybody came to my office and like, I don't know what to do. And throughout the weeks, everybody opened up. It's like, sure, this is a success story, right? Did it happen in other classes? Like, yeah, it can be done. Our goal was to self-reflect, to understand each other, to avoid assuming what we mean by free speech, assuming that we know what it means that we need to have safe borders or to control immigration. What do people actually think when they hear these words? These were some of the topics that we discussed. COVID policies, healthcare, abortion, immigration, gun control, ethical production and waste, mis and disinformation, like social media. And people were engaged. They were, I had to say, okay, we're out of time, let's debrief, actually make sure that we leave the room as well as a group, not as individuals, and share your experiences, what you thought, how you feel about things. And the only time where it was not an issue, but where one person decided to leave the room was during the abortion debate. And this is also where I told them, like, I can understand if you're not feeling comfortable in this discussion, I'm okay with you leaving, but please come back 10 minutes before time so that we can debrief. The person did that and got to share why. And again, it worked towards a better understanding. And if you don't believe me, I have some statements from students. Even in the classroom, filled with people with different views about different topics, they can sit together and have a simple conversation and feel welcomed. Just having the opportunity to speak your mind in a safe environment is already a key thing. The course influenced my ability to join in on discussion and not being afraid to comment on topics being discussed in class because I was able to have this safe and respectful experience. As a professor, it's of course glorious to get these reviews, right? I think the discussion days in this class were one of the better uses of time in teaching students something not only pertinent to the class, but also to the rest of their lives. Directly addressing this goal of the university. Whenever I wanted to invite speakers or even politicians from both sides of the aisle to speak on campus, I met with obstacles. Our university is very hesitant to allow these events. In public, they say, yes, we invite that, we invite discussion. This is where our young minds are nurtured and developed. But then when it comes to it, it's like, I don't know, we want to avoid bad press, we want to avoid having the view being partisan. And so there's not a lot of opportunities for students. In addition to the classroom debates, we had campus-wide debates. The first one in October on COVID-19. The university just came out with new regulations and procedures, and everybody had questions. And so we came together to talk about this question. Should COVID-19 vaccination be required for university students, faculty, and staff? At our university, not required. We didn't even do testing. There was no policy in 2021 fall at all. It was, we're going back to normal. Anybody who is uncomfortable, anybody who gets ill, treat it like the flu. If you miss out on lectures, tough. And so faculty, students, everybody was concerned. We think about older people as in faculty, but we have a lot of older students as well. Students that are taking care of others. Then the next debate that we had was this week. Is deplatforming valid on college campus? Our campus got a visit in February from an evangelical who stirred up discussion, but not in a civil manner on campus. And students didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to go with their emotions. Some students were angry with other students on how they responded. Some students just walked away. All the time, of course, free speech on campus. So the person could not be removed unless they really disrupted public space. So we talked about that. What does this mean? To what extent should we be safe on campus, and to what extent should we uphold our right to speech? And this was the topic that really went into how can we treat people respectfully, and how can we also protect already marginalized groups. And finally, I brought in the discussion on political speech. How do we deal with that? And we are, as faculty, instructed not to bring it into the classroom, which I completely agree with. It has no place, my political opinion has no place in my classroom. That's not what I do as a scientist. But having an open discussion should be possible. So these debates are open to the public. Anybody can come, anybody is welcome. And this is what that looked like. Two opening speakers, moderator. It was an intimidating circle. This setup was not ideal. More people showed up than we initially thought. We had a circle of about 30 chairs, and we ended up with 60 people, and a decision to just, scoot back a little bit and make more space. But ultimately, it was pretty intimidating. But people kept coming, and people kept coming to the stage unprepared, just voicing their opinions. And we went on for 3 hours, and we were like, it's 11. We need to be tired and been here all day. But it was, talked about. It was a great experience. Not heated, no aggression, gives people topics to think about. Or students said, I really have no interest in going to the debate. I'm not too involved in politics or bothered listening to the news. Aside from my beliefs, I enjoy the debate. Not so much the topic, but what it meant, which is everyone's voice should be heard and listened to, because we live in a country that gives us that opportunity. Now again, as a faculty member, those quotes give me chills, but it also indicates, right, that this is needed. I mentioned that I am doing research on this, and so I'm collecting data and responses from students prior to debates on how they think about talking about politics, how they feel about the topics, how they are reluctant or hesitant to open up, and what they want the college to do for them. And then I invite them to debates and ask them again, what did you think of this? And I know it's just a one moment in time thing, right? We try to have this kind of debate every semester on campus and hopefully bring it into the classroom more as well. But even just having that one moment, seeing that it's possible on a campus where so many people come together, can already have great implications and positive consequences. I'm still collecting my data. I am still looking into making things actually more than just this one case study on Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Hispanic Serving Institution. And I actually like to invite everybody to bring these ideas to their campuses as well. I know that some of the institutions attending this weekend are already in contact with Braver Angels. And I know it is something that is beyond CVP and beyond voter engagement, but it can actually be also more of a foundation towards that. And again, you don't have to link up with Braver Angels. If you want any more information, please reach out. If you are interested in setting this up, or you know a member of your faculty that might be interested, reach out. I went like super modern. My students did this for me. It is our QR code that we use for the Democracy Fellows. with information for students about voting, about our elections. But I included for today as well some links to the Braver Angels website, to their college debate program. And I completely forgot to say this. They cover everything. It's at no cost to your university. It's at no cost to students, no cost to faculty. For the first debate, we had a moderator fly out from Washington, D.C., stay the night in Corpus Christi. They are working with giant funders that give them millions of dollars, and all they need is more people involved. We know that it's needed, and so let's make use of this. Now I've been talking for quite a bit. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead. So, and I'm going to repeat your question because I know they cannot hear that. You're asking how we created a situation that everybody got involved. That's a great question. And it's kind of weird. I didn't think it would work either until I saw it, right? So in my classroom, well, it was mandated. It was like, you gotta speak up or else. But ultimately I didn't need to remind them, they actually were engaged. In the bigger groups, we had that format of having 2 opening speakers, 2 students that were willing to start the discussion. They were prepared, not super prepared, they didn't have a written speech or anything, but they knew what they were going to argue. And so we had that question, is deplatforming valid on college campus? And we started with the affirmative. Somebody said, yes, it's valid, and I believe so because of these reasons. They have up to 4 minutes to make their statement. After that, they can get up to 3 questions from the audience. And people directly were asking questions. They get 1 minute to respond, and then ultimately when the time runs out, we have a speaker in the negative. They also have prepared their speech, but not completely written out. It's not like an official statement, but they already know what they want to say. They get up to 4 minutes. After that, 3 questions, if there are 3 questions. And then it is open to the public. It is, who wants to speak in the affirmative? And so we switch it on and off, right? Like it's affirmative, negative, affirmative, negative. And sometimes you need to prod your audience a little bit. It helps to have a resolution or a statement that you know that creates division. The statements are pretty controversial, but they are meant to be. Because if you make it very nuanced, everybody can kind of agree on the compromise in the middle. But the goal is to get there through discussion. So if deplatforming valid, yes, no. But COVID vaccines are mandatory, yes, no. It's like making that statement. If nobody wants to talk, then you can hold a very brief sort of poll. Right? Just saying, who here is kind of leaning towards the negative? And who here is kind of leaning towards the affirmative? Or who is really in the middle? And just by show of hands. And so then you can actually ask people, hey, would you be willing to explain why you think this is the right way to go? And with that sort of softer language, you invite people to be okay with speaking up. And the rules are set at the beginning. And with that, for me, it was really nice to have a professional moderator there. They have experience with this. They've done it a lot of times. I was not the person from campus, right? I was not like the professor in charge, but it was a different individual. And people love to talk. They really do. They're just scared to. But if you have to create the right setting, it really works. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So on a campus with maybe like lower student turnout for events like this, and one with clubs that are deeply entrenched views, how would you stop a open debate from essentially becoming a throwdown between two clubs with like opposing views?
That's a great question. So the question was, how about campuses or colleges that have pretty low turnouts to events and have very entrenched student organizations that have specific views? I can imagine a situation where you have the college Republicans versus the college Democrats, and it just becomes this smash partisan fest, right? How to avoid that? We avoid that by knowing the context in advance. And this is a little bit, it's predicting an outcome in a situation. It doesn't always go as glorious as I portray it. But with the time limits, with the moderator actually picking the people to speak, if the moderator knows in advance that there are these clubs, sometimes we make people actually not sit here and there. We actually say, okay, half of you stand up and switch seats. We had on the COVID vaccine debate, half of the room was in mask, half of the room was not. We know how politicized mask wearing is nowadays. And so I said, yeah, this is not gonna help because we already built the structure in the room that we have at pro and anti. So make people uncomfortable. And then through speech, they become comfortable. And if it's really with those organizations that are going against, you need a good moderator. And I can recommend some people. Also those speeches, the first ones are about 4 minutes, and then ultimately they are shorter and shorter. So that it's like, okay, you're capped at 2 minutes now. Because the main points have been set, but we still invite people to participate. And so the debate with 60 people, that lasted long. The debate on free speech, we had about 30 people. It went on about an hour and a half. People still wanted to go, but we were like, this is a good moment to stop because you can go on forever. I think that is a good approach to do that. These debates also take place online between multiple campuses nationally.
We have 2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
The first one asks, would you say that we must never be fearful about our opinions, regardless of how controversial they sound? And they're asking because they've seen other universities where students face disciplinary consequences. And then the second one asks how your events are advertised.
So let me go with the practical question first. Question on how are the events advertised? I work together with our Office of Marketing and Communication to print flyers, the ones that I had in my slides. We post them on the university website, university event calendar. I send them out to offices of the deans of the colleges, who send them out to faculty. Word of mouth, right? It's very much students speaking to one another, Facebook, Instagram. And sometimes it helps if we make use of those large lectures where students need to be engaged in civil organizations or civil events. And so they need to go to certain events, certain number of events per semester. Sometimes faculty members do that. We never require it, of course, it's still voluntary. Other ways of promoting these things is it starts small and then keeping up with it, right? How do we promote voting? How do we promote voter awareness? Similarly, invite local media, not on the topic or the content of the discussion, but on the fact that it's happening, right? That conversations are taking place. those are the most common ways to advertise for the events. Now, the other question, and I know I have about 3 minutes to respond. Good practice, right? Time limit. The question was, how should we allow and respect and tolerate, basically, I think I'm paraphrasing here, anybody's opinion, no matter how controversial they are. Because sometimes students can be held accountable or come in trouble with student conduct on college campus. There is no easy answer. And as my students well know, with me, it always starts with, well, it depends. I don't know if you've heard your professor say that in your class, that one depends, right? Read your student conduct, read your university policies, know what they tolerate and what not, like what you can do as a student. Most of the time, this is in general, the conduct is stated as everything is allowed as long as it's not disruptive or I think it can be offensive, but not disruptive to the order on campus, something like that. How do we define that? Good question. All right, so I think, yeah, we should talk with everybody and anybody with any opinion, no matter how controversial they are. If it is based on complete misinformation or disinformation, we're also able to point that out. If there is a topic that you completely disagree with, you can walk away. Having these debates doesn't necessarily solve students' responses to people speaking out on campus in the public space unprovoked. But it does create a better cohesion on campus and an eye-opening moment for them to say, okay, hey, this is actually possible. We can talk with one another, even though we completely disagree. I think that question is probably a perfect topic for one of these debates, right? To what extent are we okay with this, and where do we draw the line? When people are physically hurt, when it's indeed disruptive to the safety, most campuses draw the line there. That is a tough question. Thank you for it. I think that is my time. Thank you all for your attention, and please reach out if I can be of any other help.
Let's give Dr. Eckhoff another round of applause. Shared, I think it'll be really impactful as we go and have these discussions that are much needed to be had. Before we bring up our keynote panel, we're going to take a very short 5-minute break just to give them a chance to get set up. So feel free if you want another snack or just want to stretch your legs for a second. Virtual guests, feel free to also do the same. Everyone take care of your needs, and we are going to start in 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Great. I'm really excited to introduce our next panel. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jonah Green. I am the Deputy Texas State Coordinator for Campus Vote Project, also a former Democracy Fellow and former National Programming Intern. Thank you all for being here. Like I said, I get to introduce this awesome panel, but first I want to introduce Ms. Delaney Ferris Dyer. Though she was raised in Arkansas, Delaney Ferris Dyer is finding her Texas pride the longer she's here. The students she works with and the excitement they share in caring for their community through civic engagement has been the highlight of her time in Texas. In her time outside of work, you will find Delaney eating pastries on a hike with friends or spending time with her partner and their dog Wanda. Delaney attended Hendrix College for her Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology and Anthropology, and then served a 2-year term with AmeriCorps. She then went to receive her Master's of Education in Higher Education from the University of North Texas. She now works at Texas Women's University as the Assistant Director of Civic Engagement. So I give it up.
Oh, thank you for that intro, Jenna. So hello, and welcome to our Keynote Student Leader Panel discussion. My name is Delaney Ferris Dyer, as Jenna said, and I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I am currently the Assistant Director for Civic Engagement at Texas Women's University, where I get to work alongside both Democracy Fellows and Andrew Goodman Foundation ambassadors on our Pioneers Vote initiative. So like many of you, our campus has tried many different approaches to engaging students in civic engagement processes with an emphasis on voter education and voter turnout. Today, our student leader panel will be sharing their own insights into their campus successes, lessons learned, and ideas they have as we move toward runoffs and general midterm elections. So I'll introduce them. First, I'd like to introduce Andy Hackett. Andy's pronouns are he, him, and he is a sophomore at Texas Women's University, majoring in child development and minoring in political science. He is passionate about educating his peers on civic engagement matters and doing whatever he can to make voting as accessible as possible. He hopes to one day get involved in the state school boards, working to make sure our public schools have equitable resources for all students and that teachers are supported in meaningful and purposeful ways. Next, I'd like to introduce Rachel Thompson. Rachel's pronouns are she, her, and she's a junior at Southwestern University, double majoring in political science and history. She is a representative in SU Votes, where she works to increase student voter education and involvement. She is also a Texas Civic Ambassador through the Annette Strauss Institute at UT Austin and a Democracy Fellow for the Campus Vote Project. This upcoming semester, Rachel is working with students all over Southwestern's campus to educate students on the gubernatorial election and increase civic engagement with underrepresented groups on campus. And lastly, I would like to introduce Oscar Lozado. Oscar's pronouns are he, him, and he is a senior environmental management student at the University of Houston Clear Lake. He is the son of working-class immigrants from Mexico. Since starting the journey of creating a genealogy of his family, he has begun the process of learning about and reclaiming his family's connection to indigenous cultures of northern Mexico. Oscar loves learning and talking about Mexican-American history and the historical use of Mexican and immigrant labor in the United States. So thank you all for agreeing to participate today. We're just going to jump straight in. So our very first question is, can you just tell us a little bit about how you decided to be involved in doing civic engagement work?
Let's go ahead and go first, please.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'm from Houston, and I originally started when I started doing work in my community in Cypress and in Fifth Ward. I did a lot of social civic work and volunteering and service projects with my church, and I just thought, how can I bring that to my campus community? So I'm president of CVSJ, which is the Coalition for Diversity and Social Justice with Eugenia, and I work with a lot of underrepresented groups on campus, and yeah, I just wanted to be able to share and to get other students involved on campus.
So I'm from the Grapevine area, and in my school, I signed up for Model UN, just not a lot of background knowledge on it. I went to a very small school with very few clubs, so there was not a lot to do. And so Hollywood was kind of what everyone did, so I signed up for it, and I ended up really enjoying the experience and getting to travel around and getting to learn about all these different topics and kind of learning more about politics and policy. And then through that, going into college at Texas University, I got accepted into the Jane Nelson Institute Legacy Leaders Program. So through that, I got to meet, a lot more people that work in government, nonprofits, stuff like that. And just through meeting all these people, it's just kind of encouraged me and got me more interested to be more civically engaged. And for me, it's like I've heard people say that it's too hard to get engaged and they don't really know where to start. And I remember being like that. So I kind of want to help my peers get back. And then also, kind of the unfortunate truth in this day and age is I'm very aware of my privilege as a white male, and so I want to be able to use my voice to try to uplift underrepresented communities and people who are more inclined to listen to me, unfortunately. So I want to use the privilege I have to share other people's voices.
Hello, everyone. So for me, I think I've always had a little bit of an environmental angle to how I approach civic engagement. I think it's kind of a three-step process for me. So when I was in high school, I went on a not so much a retreat as like a work trip through the Student Conservation Association. So I basically ended up getting sent out to Rocky Mountain National Park to work on public parks there, to work on the trails. It was a volunteer thing, and that was kind of my first exposure to nonprofits. And from there, that kind of opened up my eyes to kind of the environmental issues and how being outdoors can really affect someone's life. I'm going to change my life, and I feel like our legislation doesn't do as much as it could to address some of those issues or to get people outside and to get people in tune to the issues that do affect them. But also, I think a big moment for me was the election of 2016, where I'm a returning student, so this spans about 10 years. But I've always kind of checked back into civic engagement in different ways. And one of those moments was that election, because I looked at the results and I remember looking at the turnout and being like, I can't just keep checking back in periodically because that's what everyone does. And then we get moments like this election where the election was decided by an election that was basically a lot of people's table. There was a lot of voter apathy. There has been a lot of kind of detachment from the political process, and I see that in my own community. And it's really hard to kind of reach out and talk to people about that. So I think getting into this work and getting into canvassing prior to this was my way of saying, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to work on this because that's the best way to learn about the political process and how to affect change. And if people don't see you doing that, they may not really listen to you when it comes to voting and when it comes to talking about issues. So that's kind of how I started.
So you all touched on this next question just a little bit already, but something we hear a lot from students that who want to get involved is, where do I even start? There's so much to do. This is so overwhelming. So what advice would you give a student who is just beginning to get involved in this kind of work?
Right. So when I first started working with TCA, just Texas Civic Ambassadors, the first thing they said, go find a network. And I thought I would have to do a lot of this work by myself, but apparently there were people already at my school doing work. SU votes, they had a lot of the steps already planned out. They already had a polling place. I was like, what can I add to this organization? How can I help? We have a lot of similar goals, and Dr. Singer's just in the audience right there. So I just went out and found people who wanted to do similar things, who are really dedicated and want to get other students involved on campus. And then once you have your network at school, it's easier to go out into the community and do the things that you want to do.
First of all, I definitely agree with having good networks, because it really is like, helping you get started, not doing as much work, adding on to what's already working. But I also think it's important to figure out two things, kind of what you're interested in and what your campus needs. So for me, I knew I was really interested in educating. I love teaching, I love working with people, and just talking to people. And then I just kind of started involving my friends all the time to figure out what my campus was meeting. So it was right around the time the primaries were happening, and I was talking to my friends, and I realized that none of them knew what we were voting on in this upcoming November election besides the governor. So I realized that there was a need on my campus to kind of do some what's on the ballot educating. And so like through that, I was able to combine my interest plus figure out what my campus needed. So I could like create the project and start working with Alexis, who's right there. She's one of the Anchorman ambassadors, and we're doing the what's on the ballot presentation and some social media stuff, which I think has been really helpful for our campus because I've already heard some feedback from our piloted like presentations I would give. It's like, oh, I didn't realize like that much was on this next election. So I think that was a pretty awesome experience, and it's like I could see that learning what my campus needed was really working.
So I agree with Andy on kind of relating your interests to civic engagement and kind of framing civic engagement in a way that helps other people be interested in it. For me, that looks like, so it helps that I study this, and I study kind of the social aspect of environmental justice and kind of how societal factors are related and compounding, and that helps me work towards change in that sector, and it motivates me. So if you can relate it to people's general well-being or to what their field is, beyond, I think I know a lot of us are like political science majors and stuff, but if we want to reach out to STEM students, we want to make it relevant to them. And for example, STEM students rely on a lot of research funding. And if you talk to them about funding in terms of being influenced by civic engagement, they're a little bit more likely to kind of put those pieces together and say, hey, I need to do that because my prospects depend on it. In a way that campuses are really good at doing it. And mine in particular, UH Clear Lake, the University of Houston Clear Lake is good at taking student organizations like the Environmental Justice Association on campus. And those clubs actually interact with and volunteer for local nonprofits. So the Environmental Justice Association at the University of Houston Clear Lake volunteers for the Galveston Bay Foundation. So they do direct community work that relates to public advocacy. So it's not voting, but if you kind of open up the world of civic engagement to students, they're a little bit more likely to listen to you when they're like, hey, you should go vote. Because they're already doing it. They're already going the extra step because they're interested. So.
There are many students and administrators here who are planning their outreach strategy and events on their campuses. What is some advice you can give them to help them be successful and engage the student communities that they serve?
First, students love food, love free stuff. I love free t-shirt myself. And students don't like read emails. I've learned that. So if you can like advertise to students in a way that like is helpful to them, or you know that's like reach them, and find something fun. Like students want to come to an event where it's like interactive, or maybe I can get something to take it home. Yeah.
You got questions?
Yes, okay. Yes.
So kind of outreach, whenever I was kind of first starting with Mark Skills, this is something I struggled with a lot. I have sat at many a table where nobody can talk to me. But kind of looking at like what specifically my campus, like what the demographics look like. So Texas Women's University, they're really well known for serving a lot of student parents or older students that are kind of coming back. We have a lot of community students, so kind of talking to different people, Cassie especially kind of helped me talk through this when I was first starting, but really even like figuring out where your students are if they're not coming to you is kind of finding them and not giving them a choice to talk to you. And so next year we're planning on actually going into classrooms because that's the one place we know for a fact that we will find students is in classrooms, hopefully. and kind of engaging in that way, and also free food. And I always, on top of that, add like inclusive food, because I myself have celiac disease, and so there's sort of events where I'm like, oh, so making sure you're kind of being accommodating towards as many needs as you can.
I agree with the free food thing. That definitely works. It's worked for me. I think that when tabling, sometimes like it helps me to just not address voting. If somebody comes up and they're like, "Oh man, I'm so hungry, I'm tired, I have so much homework," I'll just talk to them about their day, and then they'll come around and be like, "Oh, okay, so what's this about?" It's kind of a weird effect that I've noticed, but outside of that, if anybody hasn't done this already, you're engaged in student organizations, and volunteer. If you volunteer with these organizations and they're not already engaged in this work, you're stuck with them for hours. So they're gonna listen to you. I actually did a big volunteer event a couple of weeks back where we got bussed out to the sites. So it was a big day. And I was on a bus for I think an hour with a couple of people there. I felt kind of bad because I talked to them about civic engagement the whole time, and they didn't really have a choice. So that's my advice.
This is great advice. So while working to increase student voter engagement, can you share what's been your most frustrating experience?
Definitely turnout, and like as students, we know what it feels to be burnt out, and it's like when people just keep asking you for things and just keep asking you to show up. Yeah, people don't want to go to things, and so you have to make it students worthwhile to get up out of their room, or like to actually show up to these events, or to actually like fill out this form so you can get registered. I think I had one more thing, but I totally forgot. So
Turnout definitely is a big frustration. Like I said, like I've sat at tables and stuff like that, and nobody's come up or they come up and just think something, and then I kind of start talking to them, and then as soon as it turns to, "Oh, are you registered to vote?" Right. So just it's frustrating sometimes seeing students that want nothing to do with politics, because it's scary and it's uncomfortable, and so people kind of are scared to engage in that conversation that might turn into something that can be seen as controversial or political. So it's just been frustrating kind of figuring out how to address that or like go about it. But it's definitely helped me kind of learn how I can kind of flip some of these conversations and figure out what works to get people interested. So definitely like engaging it towards people's specific needs, like figuring out what fields they're in or what their interests are, and being like, oh, so you should be engaged because, and then hopefully that kind of gets them in.
So, turnout. And two other things for me. One is kind of having the same conversations, which I think you touched on earlier, but I get some of the same questions when I talk to different people, and there's just kind of a gap in understanding about just a basic understanding of how our political process works and how nonprofits work. And that can be a little taxing when you have this in-depth conversation about what you do with somebody for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then the next person does the same thing. You're like, I just had this whole conversation. So that can be a little bit, not frustrating, but it can take up a lot of time. And lastly, I would say that for me personally, I've been frustrated with running out of time. I mean, I run out of time to do things, or conflicting schedules can be really not fun. If you just can't make it to certain events, that might translate to good work. So there's not enough time.
I actually remembered my next point. How do we get students who this isn't their normal thing, like this, who would like think, oh, that's not for me, civic engagement is not for me? How do we change the students' minds? Because I noticed that we have a lot of the same students showing up to these events. I'm like, that's great, I love that. How do we get your roommate to show up? How do we get a STEM major to show up? As Oscar was talking about before, we need to like tend or change our approach to make it more to make other students understand it or want to be engaged. And I think we're all here to like figure out how do we get other demographics at our school and in our communities engaged, especially if they think it's not for them.
Now let's flip that question. I want you to share a moment that you're really proud of and that you've experienced while doing student voter engagement.
So a few weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago at this point, we had a drag show, and before we had like a bit of mixers, there was just a bunch of tables happening. And so I'm just trying to get around, so people just end up at my table and we're actually talking. But through all this, so it was definitely the busiest table I've ever been at. I probably talked to 40 or 50 people. But there was one student, and I kind of get in the habit of I just like have the same spiel that I go over and over again. Whenever somebody comes up to me, so I kind of just went straight into my spiel. I was like, "Are you registered to vote?" And she said, "No, I can't. I'm an international student." And so kind of 2 things. One, at that moment, I realized I should probably switch my intro question to be more inclusive. To be like, "Can you register to vote? What do you want to know about?" And then 2, like we still had a really like good, genuine connection and conversation. She was asking me, she's like, "I still want to be engaged. I still want to be like a part of the community." And so this kind of asked what she could do. And so we had a really good conversation just talking about how she can still be civically engaged, even though she can't necessarily vote. So I told her, for your friends to vote, attend meetings, like that, you can still use your voice. So it was awesome to still be able to connect with her that way.
So for me, I think one of my big moments so far as a democracy vote has been getting approval to do kind of a podcast series on the SBA cast. Part of it was finding out that existed. So that was amazing that we even have that, but also having the infrastructure in place already so that all I have to do is basically make the content. That was really cool. I mean, the fact that it was that SVN was so supportive was amazing. So that whole process was great. And actually finishing something, editing it, posting it, going through all the final touches was great. And it was great to have that experience to share with the team and with the team that wasn't all from my campus. So one of the things I struggled with personally is that I'm a transfer student. It's my first full semester on my campus. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't familiar with all the resources. I mean, I was figuring out how my campus works for the first, 2 months of my term. And I'm kind of a digital creature, so having that whole process come together, being able to work with people who are in different parts of the country, use technology, and have a deliverable that I could be like, I did this. That's the kind of person I am. That's kind of how I measure things. So that was great. I mean, that made me feel so good. I was in the middle of like a kind of a heavy part of my semester, and as soon as I finished that podcast, it just made me feel better. So that was really cool.
So 2 things. We just had an SU Votes meeting, and Dr. Sidner pointed out that wow, we have so many people in this meeting. And I realized, I was like, we grew a lot, because last semester, some of the meetings that we had, we only had like 3 students, 4 students, doing a lot of this like civic engagement work. And then by the end of the semester, we had maybe 10. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but Southwestern is very small. And for us to have like a lot of students want to come and plan for next year and get involved for next year is pretty important. The second thing is on March 1st on the primary elections, we had a Pizza at the Polls event where we gave away t-shirts and like stickers and stuff. And that was really important because we reached out to other campuses and got their help, and a lot of people showed up. I was very proud of them. I'm kind of a rogue.
Okay, so something I feel like you guys have all mentioned in your comments is about cross collaborations and campus partnerships, community partnerships. Would any of you mind sharing a little bit of how do you create those partnerships, and then who you feel like on your campus is really in a partnership with you in promoting civic engagement?
So our coalition, we have like at least one representative from almost every part of our campus. So we have like Greek life, we have some people from the Coalition for Diversity and Social Justice, athletes, STEM girlies. And we realized that to have these people in our org, we just have to reach out to our friends. My roommate is a STEM major, and like I don't know that many STEM people, so how can I get her to reach out to someone else? It's a lot of like groundwork, not sending mass emails because those don't work, but like talking to someone face to face, going to these people's events, and just showing up and tabling stuff.
So this one's pretty clear on my campus. My point of contact, kind of the office that I work in, is the Office of Student Involvement and Leadership at the University of Houston Clear Lake. And my direct supervisor, Mohammed, is amazing. I mean, he does so much work, and between him and student orgs, there's just so much room for people to be involved. The way he supports student organizations within that office, and the way that students actually run programs that drive student involvement is amazing, because one of the things that they do is they have this portal, it's a website called Get Involved, and basically it runs this program that's like a leadership achievement a track. So there are several tracks depending on what you want to do or what organizations you're working with, and those are pretty good incentives for people to get involved, so long as your events are set up through that portal. So that's a pretty good mechanism for translating student organization membership to direct student volunteer hours for civic engagement. I didn't do a great job of harnessing that this semester, but I started to get really close. Like I said, I was still trying to figure out how that works, but as soon as I saw it and I made that connection, I realized, wow, this is a pool of volunteers that we can incentivize and reward for doing community work. And probably, odds are they'll just keep doing it once they graduate, because that's the point of it. So definitely Mohammed, definitely a couple of student organizations in particular. Because it was my first semester, I went to a lot of different student organization meetings to try to figure out which ones I belonged in, more or less which ones I kind of meshed with. And I gravitated towards the ones that do a lot of service. So as soon as I found those communities, I think not everyone has that at their campus, but if you have a student engagement involvement or a student engagement office that supports student organizations, I think kind of mediating between the two is super important. You can bridge that. You'll get a lot of good effort out of everyone involved. So
this is Jimmy's first year kind of in Democracy Fellows. So I'm kind of figuring it out together. But whenever I first started, I kind of got thrown into this network. So we have Pioneer Votes, which is like one of our big civic engagement initiatives, but then we also have we just call it our civic engagement committee or task force. And so there's a lot of people on it from just a lot of different departments on campus. So I'm on it as like a student representative, Delaney's on it, our crowd is on it. And so that's really awesome, because it's people just from all around campus kind of sharing ideas and kind of talking just to see what would get students more engaged, and also like how we can all work together within our departments to kind of host successful events and stuff like that. So that's
Thank you. So I believe we have time, okay, to take one or two questions. So if we could have one question from the chat, if anyone has any, and then we'll also take one question from the live audience. So if you do have a question, maybe over here, feel free to raise your hand, and we can ask our panelists. Yes, over here.
So it was Rachel, I'll pick up the names, but when we were talking about free food, goal for students, you're talking about trying to find activities to engage students with. A lot of examples of what y'all been at. Sure, I know. So we're from Texas A&M San Antonio, and one of the for Hispanic and HSI, Hispanic Service Institution. And so one of the activities that Denise did, our democracy coordinator, was Qantas and redistricting. Because it was like, everyone's from like Qantas, like Mexican bread, sweet bread, and the kind of lines look like redistricting lines. So is there anything that you're all done? The flyer looked really cool. Like they just went like, anyways, so is there anything like that y'all use that works with the
Yes, so I wasn't here for this, but I heard that SU Votes did a competition of like Greek life versus sports, and other organizations who could get the most number of students registered to vote. And I think they had a prize at the end. We're trying to get that started back up. And we asked students, what do you want the prize to be? Because I don't know, like I pick something that I want, but like what other students want. You can also have like a t-shirt design competition or have something that other students want on a t-shirt and get that made. Ask students what they want to eat at these events, pizza, tacos, other desserts. But yeah, like your idea, we're gonna have to write that down.
Yeah, just kind of like some other things, just trying to come up with fun theme ideas also that engage people. So we did a popcorn politics and PJs event where we watched the State of the Union. So it was in the evenings and we had popcorn and or PJs and stuff like that. And it was really fun. It was a more like low key event, still we were kind of talking about it. And then we did have a raffle at the end where we gave away like a nice like heated blanket. So just kind of having food there and then also announcing that it's like raffles and prizes and stuff like that. And anywhere for a college student can leave something for free.
So when I seen on my campus, I saw two things that impressed me. One is that so I'm the SACDAS, I forget the whole definition for the acronym, but it's the like Chicano Native American Students in Science Club at my campus. They put together this really well designed poster for this fun event involving like Selena music. So they had like Selena music. I think they showed the movie. And it went on for a couple hours and I think it went really well. The students were obviously really excited for it. And then at the institutional level, what I was really impressed by was, like I said, the Office of Student Involvement and Leadership does a yearly event. It's just one day of service. It's this volunteer drive. And basically they take all the volunteers that sign up and they bust them out to different sites. They have 3, 4, 5 sites. And I was new to the campus and I showed up to the event and it was hundreds of people. And it was really, really cool because I saw people from the community and I saw people from campus and they were both well represented. So I think having some event kind of like that, it's yearly, low commitment. It's not like you're chipping away at people's calendars. If there's just one thing that they have to put away on their calendar, save the date, and get it along, I think that might be successful. I haven't done it yet, but I've seen it work.
Do we have any questions from the online chat? Any other questions for anyone in person? Yes.
This sounds great on experience sponsors. As I've been trying to get administration of my university to do everything, I can organize what I want, but they will not.
Yes, totally understand. We had a lot of our Pizza at the Polls events sponsored by TCA. So that was through UTs, but for my school specifically, we have like grants that we can apply for. You can use that money and like write up why you need it, why this is beneficial for your school. I know that a lot of these like coalitions aren't giving money like the same way as other organizations, but there's money at your school, you just gotta ask for it, and you gotta say like, this is needed and this should be institutional, this should happen yearly.
So I've been to a lot of different meetings and presentations through the Campus Build project on this specific topic. It's just a chronic issue of being underfunded, lobbying for funding, being turned down, waiting for the next year, and programs can languish. So I think that this is kind of hard to do, but I think that communicating to students that their student government actually does things is really important, because I know as a student, I've heard other students be like, oh yeah, I went to either their club representatives or their members of the student government body. They're like, oh yeah, well, we showed up, it was whatever, we voted on some stuff, I can't remember. And this is to me, it's a campus that's actually really pretty good at these things, but the student body doesn't understand the mechanisms of getting funding, or at least their role in it. And I think explaining to students that the more they ask, the more they receive, the more pressure we can collectively put on our institutions, and make them understand that if students demand something that you're already asking for, that they might want to allocate funds for that. So that's just what I've seen. And I think that there isn't enough pressure from student government bodies at a lot of institutions, because it's just kind of a resume filler sometimes, unfortunately. So.
I'm totally honest, I'm not even pretend to know where we are coming from, my supervisor seems
A couple of places. And my supervisor's in the back, but way more. So, yeah, we are one of the lucky few campuses that receives a stipend from the Andrew Goodman Foundation, and so some of our events are able to be covered through that. And then additionally, having an office of civic engagement on our campus is very, I think it states Texas Women's University's mission very clearly, having that. And so it is a priority for our school, and so that funding comes through my office. And so I know that we're really unique in that situation, and we're really lucky that our institution sees the need for this. And so, not to say it's we're just rolling in it or anything like that, but they do often hear our voices and our needs, and so they supported us in coming here, driving in last night, and things of that nature. So I definitely acknowledge the luckiness that we have in that. Yes. Do we have time for one more? Yeah, one more. Okay.
So I know recently at our flagship birthday university, we had Beto come and speak to the students about his campaign and what he wanted to do as a school. So at Chicago School, do y'all have speakers come out and speak to the students to kind of increase that, political, registration or in terms of voting, and have a student actually see who wants to be in this position,
Just want to say, have some friends who go to KB. So last September, we had a city council candidate forum, which SCOs and CSJ was a part of, and we had two candidates come and talk to a group of students, and all the students just had free reign to ask questions. Some of the candidates were flustered, but we got to the point very quickly. What are you going to do for the community? What are you going to do for Southwestern students? What is your job? What is city council in general? And you realize how many students who aren't in these organizations actually care and want to know what the people
who are running for office gonna actually do. So if great job for having me to come and talk. And I definitely recommend doing that at your own school.
All right. Well, I just want to, oh, do we have time for more, Bianca?
This is the last one.
No?
No, we have to do one more, then we're gonna.
One more. Rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, well, I congratulate you for bringing that up because I personally been emailing him. Our school, and it was a pretty disappointing, but we had a text representative come and no students came at all. And so that was pretty disappointing to even have people come to like these events and, you know, talking to students, but no students come. So I guess my question is, and then I hear what you guys are stating, like we had the athletes, student, you know, Greek club, Greek life. How are you guys breaking those social boundaries? Because to be honest, I'm an older student. I was a transfer student. I'm older than a lot of the other students that I go to class with. I don't live on campus. So how are you guys breaking those social boundaries of, hey, come to this event, hey, it's awesome to have representatives here. It's fun beyond just like free stuff and free food. Like, how are you guys doing that on campus?
Just something quick. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very hard, especially if you don't know people in these like different boards or like people in Greek life or athletes. But maybe if you get one person who are in these boards and ask, what do y'all want? What do y'all need? What would your friends in Greek life show up to? And we'll show up. We'll take our coalition and we'll go to where you need us to be instead of you come to us.
I know for me, I will talk to anyone that will listen. So I just pester people. Sometimes it works. So really, it's just like free reminders also because, you know, college kids are busy. They're in school, they're in work, some of them have kids and families and take care of people. So just kind of keep reminding people. And then I know some of the events that do really well on my campus are the ones that are posted, you know, on social media, on Pioneer Engage, which is like our online database for events, and then plus there's like flyers everywhere. So just doing like everything you can to get the word out about these things. And one thing I know it's hard to like target whole organizations. So one thing that I kind of like doing is finding just like one person within that organization, and be like, and go tell all your friends about it. Especially like, you know, I'm not involved in Greek life, so I don't mean Greek life is going to listen to me. But if I can find something that is, and then there's somebody that's well known, like, you know, just finding like 1 or 2 people from each organization that can then kind of help spread the word instead of you trying to do all of it yourself.
I think for me, it's been helpful. So it's been hard. It's hard. It's not as an individual, but definitely as like an agent of an organization, essentially. People don't want to talk to you. If you're like, I have a stated purpose, they just run away. So I try to be pretty passive. I try to let things kind of play out. I more or less infiltrate student organizations. And I'm there. And then when people are like, man, I never see you, you seem so busy. I'm like, and they'll ask me, they're like, what do you do? And instead of telling them about my job or, you know, my degree, I tell them about this. And I find that works. And I think if you pick the right student organizations with the right membership, that can be helpful. Because, for example, my clubs are like Southwest, so it's kind of a semi-ethnic oriented organization that crosses majors. And then first generation group for me that crosses majors, ages, and a couple of other demographics. So I feel like organizations tend to be diverse. They're already collections of people who you may not normally see outside of those organization settings together, where they have different schedules and stuff like that. So I think that organizations with large memberships really help.
And I just wanted to say one more thing, because also you always need motivation to encourage people to come to things. One thing that I, whenever we were doing our deputy registrar training, the organization I'm in, Legacy Leaders, and then we also have another scholars program, President's Leadership Council honors and stuff like that, and they all have a certain amount of hours they need to get. So sometimes volunteer stuff, but some of the hours are just going to campus events, or doing things that are considered leadership development and stuff like that. So kind of figuring out who's in charge of those programs, and getting your events to count as those professional development and stuff like that. So that helps we were able to get that to count for the legacy leaders, and so we had a bunch of them come do the voter deputy registrar training because we're it'll count as your hours that you need. So it's kind of more of an incentive to help to figure out what organizations have requirements like that, and just talking to those people.
Great. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights and your campus experiences and your experiences in these programs. And with that, we'll welcome Bianca back to the stage.
We gotta give them another round of applause for that. Thank you for answering all of our questions. I'm pretty sure those will be please throughout. I have one more comment, but I do want to thank you all for your work, your engagement, and also just getting up on the stage and sharing so much of what you've done and answering our questions. I just want to thank all of you. With that, I do want to say we have made it to lunch. But before we move forward, I did want to give a little bit of information for our virtual attendees. Due to Wi-Fi and a few other things in the building, we will not be able to stream our Capitol tour, but I am going to ask the office if they have any virtual information that we will be able to send to really all of our attendees, including the ones that will be here for it, and definitely our attendees that aren't able to be here with us that are virtual. I did want to let you know. But what we are going to do now is we are going to break for lunch. I have some directions to give before we start and some thank yous for that. For virtual attendees, I believe you will be able to access the Zoom room if you want to do lunch together or fellowship or hang out. But we will be officially reopening it at around 2 because we start back up at 2:15. That's for everyone here. Our next speaker starts at 2:15 to give plenty of time for lunch, the Capitol tour, and even a little break before we come in here. I do want to thank, and they were mentioned a few times, so we go to the next slide real quick. This was a real cool alley-oop. Pizza to the Poles got mentioned on the stage, and Pizza to the Poles is actually our co-sponsor for lunch. Another thing that got mentioned on the stage is being mindful about dietary restrictions and as much access as you can. When we are trying to provide food for a large number of people, sometimes it can be difficult, but we're using a local pizza shop in their pizza press because they have gluten-free pizzas and vegan cheese pizzas and vegetarian. So we tried our best to get a bunch of options and a bunch of salads. Y'all need salads. There's a lot of salads. And salads and things like that. Try our best to make sure everyone's needs are met to the best of our ability today. On day 2, we also have talked to our lunch getting set up at Thompson, also sharing a lot of the different allergies and food requests and so that we could. So please make sure, those of you that have any dietary restrictions, to make sure when you walk in today, tomorrow, even for snacks, anything, just let us know or remind us or ask a question so we can point out, this is where this is, this is where this is, and we can help you navigate. And if there's nothing we have, please still talk to us. Do not think you are being a bother. Let us know and let's see if we can figure something out, because we are just happy to have you here and we really want to meet all the needs that we can. But shout out to the Poles, because they are a co-sponsor and provided much help. So if you're still there, grab some more. Let us know. Those of you that are exiting from lunch, if you go out we will have help you get to what is the we're going. We will make sure in the front, like I said, if there's a pause, we will just designate like where we're going and all that. We will also let you know there is starts at 1 o'clock, so you have plenty of time to eat before it starts at 1 o'clock. They're doing a tour for our group that they have reserved just for us. And evidently there is a tour office that is really close to, I believe, the South entrance. I am probably gonna be coming in. We can walk you in if you're with us, but if you're not, ask one of the gazillion folks working here to be like, where is the tour office? I have a tour one. Please point me because this north, east, west, south entrance is confusing me. So we will be there to help you, but if you let people know you have a tour that you have to be at the tour office at 1, many people and staff here also can point you out in case you're kind of hanging out or you kind of break from the group. And that will start at 1 o'clock. But I do again want to thank everybody for being here. We will meet in the tour guide office a little before 1 o'clock. It's in the south hallway, but we will help you. Please go ahead, stretch, be happy, be merry. We'll get you to the South Houston building. Virtual attendees, like I said, you can hang out or if you want to log off or log back in. We will start in here. Our next speaker is at 2:15. That will give us a great presentation about on-campus polling locations or getting the polling locations, the importance of polling locations. So with that, I'm gonna stop talking so that you all can eat. And thank you all for being with us. Let's thank our panel one more time.
I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. Eddie is the Deputy Director of the Students Vote Coalition. In his current role, he manages the Slsv Coalition's programmatic work that supports campus civic engagement efforts. Prior to joining the Slsv Coalition, Eddie was active in nonpartisan civic engagement organizations from the local to national level. Most recently, Eddie was the director of Rise to Vote, a program that partners with college and professional sports teams, leagues, and athletes to improve civic engagement in our country. Eddie has also worked for the Funders Committee for Civic Participation and Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. In Texas, he was a co-founder of Move Texas and worked in the office of the state representative Ruth Jones McClendon. He graduated from the University of Texas at San Antonio. So without further ado, everybody please turn your attention towards the screen and we're going to be streaming Eddie's presentation.
Hello. Sorry, I think this might be like my first hybrid event that I've ever done. And so I'm like, where am I supposed to be looking at? What do I do with my hands? I think, can everybody hear me though? Am I on?
Sorry, Eddie, give us 1 second. I need to share audio.
Okay.
Sorry, y'all. I think because I'm not sharing screen, I need to.
Let's see. Let's do one thing real quick. Eddie, we're gonna stop your share just for 1 second and then you can go right back, okay? Thank you. Perfect. Is it here that we share? No. No, it's already sharing sound.
I think.
Audio settings?
Yeah.
Is it one of these? Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, Eddie, can you do a sound check real quick?
Hello?
Perfect.
Okay.
Mute now.
Yeah, we're gonna go back on mute. Thank you, Eddie.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so hi everyone. As I was mentioning, sorry, I think this might be actually like one of the first hybrid events that I've ever done. I know we're like deep into the pandemic. So I was over here, I was like, do I get on? What do I do with my hands? Like, what's going on here? But thank you all so much for having me here today. And thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to speak with you all today about polling places on college campuses and the importance of them and how to be able to expand access to it. I also just want to, before I get started, just thank everyone for being here and being in the room, giving up like so much of your time to learn from each other, strategize, and ultimately make sure that students have a powerful seat at the table when it comes to Texas politics. Just knowing that all of you are here really inspires me and makes me feel really confident about the future of the state. And as mentioned, obviously, it's Texas has a very special place in my heart, as I grew up there and spent most of my life there, really, like basically all of my life there until now I'm in New York. But always thinking of Texas, going back very often, and very happy to be here. Anyways, as mentioned, my name's Eddie Zerby. I'll be talking about being able to get polling places on college campuses. And it can be a pretty long and complicated process, but I'm going to do my best to sum it up in less than 30 minutes. And so today, I'm going to give you a little bit of background and context as to like why I'm here, who the SLSV Coalition is, everything like that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about polling places on college campuses, the importance of them, and like the general landscape of where they're available, and why they're so important to pursue. I'm going to try my best to summarize the process of getting a polling place on campus and give y'all a preview of, if you're just getting started or going through this process right now, what that process might look like in terms of strategies you might have to use on campus or in your community to be able to get one. And let y'all know of additional resources that can help after you leave this summit and actually, and start getting to work on getting a polling place on your campus. We should have some time for Q&A at the end. I hope we have some time for Q&A at the end. I don't think we're gonna have enough time for a group discussion, but I've got some discussion questions queued up in case we do have enough time. Anyways, so let's see, and y'all are watching the same. Okay. So who we are. So as mentioned, I'm with the SLSV Coalition. We are the national hub and largest nonpartisan network in the country dedicated to increasing student voter participation. We came together in 2016 to help organize the national student voting space. We realized there were a ton of people working on this throughout the nation, and we wanted to help these leaders get support, share best practices, and ultimately collaborate for greater impact. So since 2016, the SLSV Coalition has grown to over 400 partners, including nonprofits, government entities, businesses, and student groups that work with almost 2,000 campuses in all 50 states throughout the US. Coalition partners have transformed the student democratic engagement landscape, with efforts contributing to historic 66% college student voter turnout rate in the 2020 election, which was a 14 percentage point increase over 2016. Outreach and education on college campuses has grown so much, but we're just getting started. Basically, I mean, we try to help in a variety of different ways. We have a number of programs and projects and resources, but simply put, we seek to provide local campus leaders with whatever support they might need to be successful in their own institutional context, whether that's strategic direction, human-centered resources, connections, or funding. And through providing that support, our intent is to change campus stakeholders' behavior to more directly and easily implement voter registration and mobilization strategies within their campus communities. So why am I here, right? Well, one of the programs we started up in 2020 actually, one of the programs we're a part of is called Voting Early is Easier. Originally, this program started in 2020 and was called +1 the Polls. So if y'all have been in this work for a couple of years now, you may have seen it, may have heard or been a part even of +1 the Polls. In 2020, we worked with students around the nation to place or protect campus voting sites. And the cohort that we actually worked with had an almost 70% success rate of being able to get a new polling place or protect the polling place that they had, right? Since then, the program has rebranded and has shifted their resource structure to better support campuses trying to get a new polling place. The program is really led by Campus Vote Project and MTV, but we are on the advisory board with other organizations like the Alliance for Youth Organizing, Campus Compact, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, Vote HBCU, and a few other students that were actually a part of the program in 2020 and might be in the room today, who knows. We really provide resources in two main ways. We have an online toolkit that really guides you through the process of getting a polling place. I'm going to link that toolkit at the end of this presentation, and I'm sure that link is going to be distributed within the room as well. But I'm going to try my best to summarize that toolkit in 20 minutes today. There's also a cohort component to this, which is really cool. The cohort is finalized though. I'm sure there's some campuses here that are actually a part of the cohort, but campuses that made it into the cohort, there's dozens of campuses that are participating throughout the US. They're going to get additional funding, hands-on guidance, and other specialized support to make sure that they're able to get new early voting locations on campus. And they're kind of competing each other in really fun ways for cool prizes, such as like additional funding for Vote Early Day celebrations, and might even get like tickets to the MTV VMAs. So it's really exciting to be a part of this and to be able to talk to y'all about this. But as mentioned, that part of this program is something that everybody can access, right? And it's about figuring out the importance of polling places, communicating that to relevant stakeholders, and pushing for polling places on your college campus. But why is it so important to be able to push for polling places? Why is it so important to fight this fight on campus? Well, first of all, voting access matters a lot. Lack of accessible polling places can affect voters in so many ways. It makes it harder to get to a polling place. Obviously, you need to consider transportation, having a car, being in, having good public transportation. It can make lines longer at existing polling places, especially if we're seeing polling places get closed. So it can take more time to vote. Both of those factors leading up to that. But another factor that people don't always talk about is that the less polling places you have and the less accessible that they are, it really makes voting a lot less visible in a community and makes it tougher to see voting as just a part of every year, of something that people do every year, right? Is just participate in our democracy and make their voices heard. It's harder to make it celebratory, it's harder to make it visible, and it's harder to really just instill that in our culture, right? We also know that lack of access is a top reason that young people don't vote. So when we're talking about college students in particular, we know that lack of access can really make a difference. In 2018, which had record youth turnout, nearly half of young people that did not vote cited lack of access as a top reason for not doing so. Additionally, also in 2018, when Florida was able to expand early voting locations on college campuses, the campuses that were able to expand access saw turnout increase among 18 to 20-year-olds by around 5 percentage points. So we know this works. We know it can make a big difference with young people voting. But the issue is that polling places have been closing down for almost 10 years now. So more than 1,600 polling places have closed since the Shelby County v. Holder decision in 2013. Definitely don't have enough time to get into that today, but it's for a variety of reasons been very, very tough the last 10 years in the voting rights fight. And also recent research from Duke shows when looking at the 2020 election, in 35 states that have election day data, 74% of college campuses did not have in-person voting options. And in the 35 states with early voting data, 90% of colleges did not have in-person early voting options. In total, this affects almost 6.6 million students. So imagine even like 5% of these people making it more accessible and easier to vote and being affected by this. Like these are hundreds of thousands of students that would be able to better cast their ballot and immediately cast their ballot if we're able to expand access on some of these campuses. It also pointed out that lack of access is more pronounced at 2-year community colleges versus 4-year institutions. So it is a very important issue to work on. So what does that process look like? And how can you get started on getting a polling place on campus? As mentioned, this is a really long process. It can take months, even years sometimes to be able to do it, but I'm gonna try my best to sum it up in like 15 minutes. So the first step is really kind of more of a research step, right? Figuring out what's even like possible, right? So figuring out what's possible in your state and what makes sense for your campus specifically. So like, let's talk about Texas specifically, right? Okay, I had an idea for this exercise and now I have no idea how to do it in hybrid. So just like shout or something if you're in the room, or if you're in the chat, put it in chat. So like for Texas, can you put early voting locations on college campuses? Does anybody know if that's like an option?
Yes.
Love that. That worked so well. Yes. So that is true. You can put early voting locations, but who can vote at those early voting locations? Is it only students registered on campus? Is it students registered in the county? Or is it students registered in the entire state?
County.
Yes. So in most cases, those early voting locations will allow anybody registered in the county to be able to vote at them. So we're like seeing like, okay, wait, that actually helps staff, that can help students living off campus, or if you're a commuter school, right, or a community college where most folks just students aren't registering actually on campus, early voting locations make a lot of sense, right? But what about election day locations? Are those things that campuses in Texas can get?
Yes.
All right, yes, also true. But who can vote on these? Is it just people registered in that precinct? Is it just people registered in the county? Or is it people in the entire state?
Depends on the county.
Depends Depends on the county. Yes, correct. Texas is complicated. I'm sure y'all have been more well aware of that. So yes, so depending, all of this adds up, depending on your campus community, one or a combination of both of these can make a lot of sense for your campus community to try to fight for, right? And this is leaving out the complication that is ballot drop boxes and vote by mail options, right? Which I know, especially this year, is an ongoing conversation in Texas, and I'm sure a big part of the discussion that y'all are having these days. So I won't really hit on that too much, but it is an option in many areas and can be very helpful, but also brings its own challenges. Anyways, so do the research, figure out what's possible in your state and if there's any local laws that you need to consider when fighting for voting sites on campus. The other thing you need to do is kind of understand your own campus. You need to build an on-campus team that can think through several questions to figure out how you're going to make a pitch and what's going to be best for your campus. So I don't know if y'all have talked about this yet, or if you will, but there's things called Unsolved Reports that are super helpful for campuses to better understand their student voter registration rates as well as their turnout rates. They can see year-to-year changes as well as where students are registering, if they're registering on campus versus off campus, if they're registering back in another state or in state. They can also see the methods by which students are voting. All of these reports are super, super useful. And if you have access to it, or if your campus participates in Unsolved and has access to these reports, you're able to really build a strong case as to which voting methods are going to be best for your campus and why it's important to expand access on your campus. Also, as you're doing this research, you're going to want to talk to students about and figuring out like what is preventing students from turning out, right? Like, is it a lack of a polling place? Is it that the polling place they have on campus only serves a certain precinct and your campus has like 5 different precincts or something? And so students are confused about who can actually vote where. Like, what is it? You really need to talk to students to understand like what does make turnout difficult and how can you make it easier working with your local election official. Sometimes that's new polling places. Sometimes that might be shifting an election day location to an early voting location. Sometimes that might mean making an election day location accessible for all precincts. There's a lot of ways to tackle things, and you really need to talk to your students to figure out what the issues are. The other thing you need to understand is like, where is your current closest polling place and how do students get there? Sometimes when you just look at like, what's on paper, it's hard to make a case for why you need to change things or expand access, right? Like, let's say on paper, there's a polling place that is half a mile from your campus and your local election official sees that and is like, why do we need a new polling place on campus? It's only half a mile away. That's like a 10-minute walk or something, right? Like, but the context they don't have and the context you can get from students is, well, that 10-minute walk is on the side of a highway because it's Texas. And of course it's on the side of a highway. So like, it's not realistic that students are going to be walking that or safe. So having that context before you start these conversations and before you talk to your local election official is going to be really helpful in you figuring out ultimately what's going to help you the most. Once you kind of get through that research phase, though, you need to start working on your campus to get support and ultimately find a location that's going to be helpful for it. When you're choosing a location on your campus, there's a couple factors you want to look at. I like to say, like, there's functionally some factors you want to look at, like where is like student traffic, where are students going to see it, where is it highly visible, etc. But there's also a lot of logistical and legal questions that you need to consider. Of course, polling places have to be ADA acceptable. In many cases, there's requirements for sufficient parking nearby, especially if it's polling places that are open to the general community, not just your campus community, which realistically they do need to be, most of them. It's very hard to make that case for it to be only for your campus community. You need to find enough space and make sure there's enough outlets and internet ports and stuff for all the voting equipment. You need to work with your IT team to get that figured out. There's also security concerns. Polling places aren't open 24/7. And so you need to make sure the room can be locked and maybe there's security cameras or maybe there's security people that can, monitor it or whatever. There's a lot of factors to consider. And as mentioned, I'm just like flying through all of these steps. The toolkit gives you everything you need to consider, which I'll link in a bit. You also then you need to start working with getting your campus on board. You need to think through like who you need on your side before you approach your local election official and who can really help you as you make the case for your campus. So thinking of student leaders, student organizations, administrators, the president's office, even thinking beyond the campus and looking at like community leaders and elected officials that can have your back. All of you want a really diverse coalition to be able to back you up and support your efforts. And you're going to need to employ a like variety of different strategies to really build support for this. We've seen people pass SGA resolutions. We've seen people get letters of support from business leaders, from elected officials, from their university president. We've seen mass mobilization efforts with like online petitions. And sometimes when you have to get creative and like move people that are just being very stubborn, like getting support from their bosses or the people they have to report to, right, can work really well, right? Using those same strategies, but, you know, kind of moving up the chain. And once you kind of build that support on campus, once you've done the research, once you have polling locations figured out, you want to get your local election official on board. You need to figure out who actually makes the decision on where to put polling places. Sometimes that can be more than one person, actually. We've seen really creative ways of people like working with their local election official first and then going to like their state board of elections. Or in Texas, I think it's like county courts, right? Like ultimately vote on them, but the local election official has to like present it. It's been a while since I've been in Texas and did this, so I don't know if that's changed recently. But anyways, you also want to make it really easy for your local election official or your decision maker to say yes to this, right? Show that you've already done all the legwork on this. Show you have multiple locations already scouted, ADA accessible, ample parking, etc. Show that you have on-campus support and that your administration is on board. Like if you don't have the administration support on this, like a local election official isn't going to want to fight that fight for you most of the time. Like they have a million things going on. They're underfunded. That's a whole nother discussion about why our democracy is eroding. But like, you know, you want to make this as easy as possible for them and know that this is like a unified effort that you're approaching them with. Another note, and I'll go into a little bit more details on this in a bit, is that like, especially if it's early on in the relationship, you really want to frame this as a collaborative partnership. There is definitely a lot of scenarios where local election officials are very difficult and against campuses. And we have seen that, unfortunately, and usually that tends to be in the South where we do see that. But from what we've seen, most of the time, local election officials have the same goals as we do. They're just like underfunded, over capacity, super stressed out because everybody thinks elections are fraud, like because people are thinking elections are fraud and they're having to go through sham commissions. And they're just like, ultimately want to support us. And you want to frame it as a collaborative partnership, not necessarily something that like you're demanding or being difficult with, unless it needs to go there. Sometimes it does need to go there and that needs to happen. But if it's especially like your first step, you always want to make this seem as like a team effort, something that you're doing to make their lives easier and something that they're doing to make it easier for students to participate in democracy. And lastly, like don't quit. Sometimes you have to ask a few times. Sometimes you have to keep going for a couple months. You have to get creative on different ways to approach this issue. Think of like elected officials that can have your back, business leaders that can have your back, etc. We've seen really cool creative methods of like working around a local election official when they're not on board. And a lot of those examples are actually uplifted in the toolkit that I'll talk about later on. Lastly, celebrate. Like make sure students are using the polling place that you've fought so hard to get. You want to make sure turnout is always high. So local election officials never have a reason to say like, oh yeah, we'll just take it back this year. I mean, nobody used it last election, right? You want to host civic holiday events. Like Vote Early Day is a great opportunity to host really cool creative parties to get people to use your polling place. We also run a program called Campus Takeover that provides mini grants to people that are hosting Vote Early Day celebrations. So you can get funding for like pizza parties, DJs, whatever it is you want to do. We have funding to help with that. Also, like, let us know when you're successful. We want to celebrate these victories. We want to uplift the great work that students are doing around the country. And if you're, you know, we want to like highlight this. So if you're successful, like, please reach out. We want to think of ways to be able to like work with you and celebrate the great victory you got. And even if you didn't get the polling place, just know that sometimes it can take months, sometimes it can take years to do this. But even if it does take that time, you're making a big difference. And UT Austin, at this point, they have what, like 4 different polling places or something on campus. But just 5-6 years ago, they had maybe 1. and they had ridiculously long lines to be able to use that one line. And it took years to be able to get to this place. Know that even if you don't see a success this year, you are starting and the movement for future voters to be able to use that. And every effort that you're making is going to be a difference maker, right? A change maker in the long run. Also, if you're not able to get to the polling, if you're not able to get a polling place, like we can still help you get students to your closest polling place, or think of alternative strategies to make sure students are still voting. So like thinking of shuttles, rides to the polls, parades to the polls, march to the polls. We've seen a lot of really cool things and ideas from partners all over the country. I'm very quickly running out of time, very, very quickly. And so I'm not really going to talk about this slide much. Basically, what this sample timeline says is that you need to start this work like right now. Start doing some initial research, start building a coalition on campus to be able to work on this, start scouting possible locations, and make the ask as soon as you can to your local election officials so you can start answering questions and working through any problems together as soon as possible. Additional resources that can help. I mentioned voting early is easier. There is a site that has a toolkit there that takes you through all of these steps, step by step, very in depth to take you through the process. There's also like templates, stories, sample letters. There's a lot there that can help your efforts. I'll put it in the chat. I don't really know how that works with in person, but I will put that in the chat regardless because it's a very cool site. MTV built it, so it looks cool. I also wanted to plug another report that we came out with last year. We interviewed hundreds of campuses and local election officials around the country to learn more about how they're working together and collaborating on different projects. It's definitely useful to take a look at that report as you start this work, or even if you're just continuing conversations with your local election official, like maybe you've already started these conversations. There's really cool tips in there about how campuses and local election officials can work together. Some like key takeaways here. As mentioned, most local election officials really actually want to work with their campuses and see the advantages of working with them. It's just that sometimes it's really difficult. If you're a student that's leading this work on your campus and you're trying to make a contact with your local election official, make sure you're working with like a staff member, administrator, or faculty member to serve as like a consistent point of contact. Even if you're really taking the lead on the meetings and reaching out and putting materials together, like after you're gone, local election officials want to know who they need to reach out to on campus when they want to keep the work moving forward. Also start early and take advantage of downtimes. I know there's counties in Texas that have primary or runoff elections coming up. So unless you're in one of those counties, like right now is actually a very good time to reach out to local election officials and over the summer before it gets into like super busy, hectic election season. And also think beyond polling places. Like I mentioned earlier, we want this outreach to be collaborative. Local election officials and colleges have worked together in really cool, creative ways throughout the country. We want you to think about like how you can be a resource to them as well. And so think of like how you can help them recruit poll workers or connect with students for internships. We saw really cool creative projects come up. Like we've seen local election offices partner with campuses to do translation of voter materials. We've seen local election offices partner with students to do graphics design. There's really cool ways that people have worked together on this in the past. And the other thing I'll plug in really, really quick, there's an additional resource from our partners at AGF about how to recruit students as poll workers. I'm not going to go into that today because like 30 minutes is barely enough time to talk about polling places, but there's additional resources there if that's something you're really interested in doing. Anyways, I'm out of breath. I need to grab some water, but if anybody has any questions, please. I know we're close to the end of time and we're not going to be able to get to the discussion, but I'd love to see if there's any questions in chat from folks on Zoom, from folks in the room that we can kind of start working through together.
Yeah, we'll take at least one question from people here in the room. Yeah. Go ahead and say it and we'll try to transcribe it in the chat so you can, or mic it. Give us a second. Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, and those of you in the chat, please put also a question. You can answer questions there.
Hi. So we're Democracy Bills for Tennessee and Galveston. And so we asked our local government to become a polling place and they told us no. And then they didn't give a reason why.
And then we found out that there's a lawsuit against Galveston County for redistricting. So do you have any suggestions for us?
Did you catch that, Eddie?
I heard lawsuit and my ears perked up.
Okay, so they're at A&M Galveston, is that right? They're at A&M Galveston. They asked their local election officials for a polling place. They said no, gave no explanation. And they found out that the local county is being sued. The Justice Department is suing their county. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the Justice Department does that. Wow, that one's really complicated, honestly. I don't have enough context to know really like why Galveston County is getting in trouble. I remember reading that in the news. Like, I think that started up maybe like a year or two ago, but I can't remember exactly why. It's probably related. If it's the Justice Department on elections, that probably means your election official might be doing something that's not right. But I don't know enough about it to know. I will say, yeah, I honestly need a little bit more context to be able to understand it. And so like, definitely feel free to email me or I can like look it up to see if there's a little bit additional context that I can get in that regard. I will say, like I said earlier, like 90% of the local election officials we talk to like are very excited to work with campuses. And so like the odds are usually in your favor when you reach out, but there are sometimes really difficult local election offices that are, and sometimes they get sued because they're doing such a bad job and are so malicious about keeping certain communities from voting. If that's the case, it's really about organizing strategies. It's, hoping the lawsuits kind of come through, and while you're waiting on those to see some change, putting pressure for maybe like administration changes, or putting pressure or setting up additional alternative forms of voting for your students, such as shuttles or parade to the polls. Like, show them that their efforts aren't working. Y'all are still really excited and turning out. And that honestly really starts to demotivate bad actors. Also, the lawsuits from the Justice Department tend to move them sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, and I think we had a question in the chat. Can you see that, Eddie?
Let's see. It says, nonpartisan students contacted both parties. Yeah. I mean, definitely when you're thinking about community leaders that might be able to get on your side and help put pressure, like county party chairs could definitely help out. It's definitely worth a reaching out to both. If you're a nonpartisan organization, which you should be if you're at the summit and I'm talking to you, you need to reach out to both parties. You need to reach out to both parties for support. I will say though, this one, honestly, actually, now that I think about it, this one is actually a kind of a longer conversation about the strategy. Like, if it's a strategic choice, like it is a choice from like a legal perspective, but like if only one party responds and is showing support, then it could make your effort look a little partisan. So it's kind of depends on what response you think you might get from your parties. But those are community, but that's exactly the type of conversations folks need to be having when they're thinking about like who are leaders in their community that can provide support, and like what are the pros and cons to having them express support.
Great. Thank you so much, Eddie, for answering those questions. And we appreciate your time so much.
Of course. No, of course. Thank you all so much. Again, thank you all so much for being here. My email's there. Like, feel free to shoot me an email if there's ever anything that Slsv Coalition can do. We have a million different programs beyond just polling places. So if y'all are wondering about how to celebrate NVRD, vote early day, want to do like other things on campuses, we're here to help, and can go more in depth on this and some of these more detailed questions. But again, thank you all so much for all the work that y'all are doing. And oh, great. I thought it said you were muted. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna leave. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.
You have some specific questions. Yeah, Unity and the entire coalition is like such a great resource to connect with. And some of the links and things in the chat, we're gonna try to save the chat. If something happens, I will also reach out to like our virtual speakers or presenters where resources were shared. Just give us a couple days, and early next week you should get like maybe email like with the links and things like that that they were sharing. Both whether you are in person or online. So with that being said, I have the great honor to introduce our next speaker. So Yui Trin is the program administrator for IDHE and is responsible for maintaining and managing campus relationships with all 1,200 participating Unsolved campuses. Remember when we heard that earlier in the previous presentation? You get to learn about it now. So it was great. Yui is particularly interested in working with campuses to help them understand their Unsolved reports, how they use their study as a resource center, and the impact of their work on college campuses and civic engagement. She holds a Master of Science degree from Northeastern University and a Bachelor of the Arts from Connecticut College. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker and bring Yui to the stage.
Thank you for being here again, and thanks for having me. And I know we're all feeling the post-lunch fatigue, so I will make this fun by throwing a lot of numbers and charts at you. Let's skip the first one. Just go. We're obviously not UT Austin, so thanks again for getting us through it. So as you guys mentioned, from the Institute for Democracy and Higher Education. So in addition to the voting report that you all know about us, or we do on things political and college campuses to provide resources for faculty members, staff members, and students to help them talk about politics on campus and how to be politically engaged. We also do climate studies for political learning, and our goal is to increase political. And we also and we also provide classroom teaching resources as well. Next slide. So the Unsolved Report is the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, and it is a higher ethically objective measure of college student civic engagement. It is a completely free service to all campuses that participate in the program. To us, if you want to sign up, it's completely free. We don't require any sort of work plan or post or pre-report for you guys. And to date, we have data from 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. So every federal election. So we only provide reports for midterm and presidential elections. And it's a database for research. And currently we have about 12 institutions in our state. And we're always looking for more institutions to join us. So if you have friends, colleagues that are looking to get an ESA report and they're not currently studying, get in contact with you or your colleagues so you can sign up. Or if you're unsure if you're in the study or not, also just shoot me an email and I'll find out. So we have all schools in all 50 states and DC in our study. Next slide. So how does Unsolved work? So Unsolved study is really easy. There's no additional work for campuses. So the way that it works is about 90% or more of institutions in the US participate in the National Student Clearinghouse, which is a database where you submit your student enrollment records for degree verifications, jobs verifications, and most importantly, student loans. So that's how they verify if you graduate or not and come to you to start asking for that money afterward. And we work with a clearinghouse, and then we also purchase Votus files from L2, which is a vendor. So all Votus files are publicly available. You just have to get access to them. In this case, we purchased them from L2. And then we match the student enrollment records that campuses submit to the clearinghouse, and we match it with the Votus files. And everything is done at the clearinghouse, so we're not receiving any identifiable data from you. So don't worry about your data being compromised. We don't know who you are. You come to us, ask the number, and that's it. And then once we get the report from the clearinghouse of who voted and where, we then match it with IPES data, which is also a database that is sent by your institution's research office. So there are two separate entities that's submitting student enrollment records. So the clearinghouse is submitted by your registrar's office, and IPES is submitted by your institutional research office. And then we, because there are two set of data, so we want to get a comparable number, and then we clean up the data. We have one person, should be two, who cleans up all like 10 million records of student voting data every election. And then we generate a report, and then we send it back to the colleges. And one of the reasons why your NSF reports get to you so late, about a year after every election, is because you have to wait until every state certify your voting file before we can actually access them and generate a report for you. So usually when you see voting data on TV right after the election, doesn't exit poll data, doesn't have actual numbers. So people could lie whether or not they voted, who knows, or who they voted for. But we get the actual data based on the day of the election, if you show up or not. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go back and forth a lot with 2018, 2016, and 2020 numbers, just so you can see comparison of how the numbers trended upward. So in 2018, 99% of Unsolved campuses saw an increase in the voting rates. And that increase was almost double. So it went from like 40% up to almost 80% of voting rates. So usually when there's a midterm elections, turnout tends to be lower than presidential elections. So this increase was stunning, really, because we were not expecting that many people to show up for the midterm elections. Next slide. So we're going to move forward to 2020 elections. So in addition to campuses receiving their individual NSL reports, we also publish a national report that's just based on data from all campuses in the US that are currently in NSL. So in 2020, the national voting rate was 66%, compared to the voting rate of 2016 election was 52%. So that's a great increase. And the registration rate was 83%, and it went up from 76%. And then the U rate was 80%. And everyone always asks, what is the difference between the voting rate and the U rate? So the voting rate is the number of people who turn out to vote divided by the total number of students who are eligible to vote. So on your campus, there might be 1,000 students who are eligible to vote, but maybe only 600 of them registered to vote. So for the voting rate, we took, so the total number of eligible students to vote is, we took the number of students who voted divided by the total eligible. So that's the voting rate. And the U rate is the number of students who registered to vote and turn out to vote. So that's why the U rate is always higher, because students who register to vote always are more likely to turn out to vote. But as Eddie mentioned earlier, there's always a gap of people who register and not vote. So you want to ask, why didn't they turn out to vote? What happened on that day? Like, you took the steps to register to vote, but what was that last piece that is preventing you from getting out to vote? So it could be because they had class that day, there's no transportation that day to a polling site. There's no polling locations like campus, so they can't get to campus. Or they might be a non-traditional students that they have childcare issues. So there could be a number of things. So we want to look at that number and see why, and then try to close that gap by providing as much resources as you can to those students and get them out to the polls to vote. And these are just some shifts in participation habits. So obviously the voting rate increased in 2020 from 2016. And we also saw a decrease in registered non-voters. So more people who register are turning out to vote. And then we also saw a decrease in non-registered. So also more people are registering to vote. So since we're at the Texas Summit, a voting summit, so we're going to look closely at Texas data. So currently we have 55 Texas institutions in Unsolved. I don't know what the possible numbers is. Currently we have 55. And you can see on the left-hand side that the number of college students in Texas have been increasingly going up. Sorry, I can't see that over there. But on the right-hand side, you see we break down by the total of students in Texas. FERPA block students are students who practice their right to not have their records be used for any purpose. So we cannot tell whether or not you voted because we don't know what your identity is, your information. You use your rights to block us from using that. And we also use ineligible to vote because they're too young, so that means that you're under 18. And then non-resident alien if you're not a citizen. So that could be a combination of things. If you are not international students, have a green card, along that line. And eligible students, so you are eligible to vote. And then the number of students who are registered and the number of students who voted. Again, look at the numbers of students who voted versus number who registered. So that's always a huge gap there. And then we also break it down by race and sex. So if you look under the eligible gender unknown, it's not because they didn't report it or they reported it as unknown. It's because not all institutions provide us with race and gender data. So we can only report that information if it's provided to us. And we always encourage you to look at the Unsolved report if you have a chance to. And look on that page. If there's blank data on it or you don't have that page, it means that your institution did not provide us with that information. And it's a really easy fix. You just go to your registrar's office if you are an administrator or a staff faculty member here, and your institution currently does not provide that information. Just go to your registrar's office or the office that submit your student enrollment records to clearinghouse and ask them to take a start submitting this data. I believe it's as simple as checking a box on the form that they submit the data to. And then we also provide further based information down there, and we'll go a little bit more to this on later slides. Okay, so going back to 2018. So if you see the column, the color column in the middle, that's representation of Texas numbers, and the gray is all institutions in Unsolved. So in 2018, you have a pretty high registration rate, but everything else is pretty much on par with the rest of all Unsolved institutions. And you go to the next slide. Thank you. And going back to moving forward to institution type. So we break it down by private institutions, public institutions, and whether or not you're 2 years. So across the board that we see
institutions have an increased voting rate. And this is important because when you, we all like a family challenge, but when you participate in these voters challenges, make sure that you're not just comparing yourself to your peer, but look at their demographic makeup of the institution. What kind of resource do they have? What is their size? Where do they belong? Like what states do they belong to? Do they have more relaxed voting laws? Do they have more restrictive voting laws that could really affect their numbers? Thank you. So again, back to 2020 and 2016 data about voting rates. So again, if you look across the board, Texas, just below the national average of all Unsolved institutions. And we break it down further by public institutions, 4-year, private, and 2-year. So this is the voting rates. And if you're going to the next slide, thank you. Registration rates. So if you look at the registration rates, it's very on par with the national average of an Unsolved institution. But if you go back, you go extra voting rate. Yeah, if you go back to the slide, the numbers of like their sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so your voting rate is lower than the national average of Unsolved institution, but your registration rates are very close to the national average. So again, go back to the students, ask them, okay, you registered to vote, why didn't you turn out? What barriers are you facing? Like, how could we help? Next slide. And again, this is the register and vote it rates. So again, it's a little more, there's a bigger difference between the two. Okay, so we really focus on closing the equity gaps in voting. Our director, Nancy Thomas, has always said she doesn't care about voting. She cares more about who shows up to vote and what barriers are they facing to vote and how can we close those barriers. So in 2020, we saw a huge increase in HBCUs, MSIs, and colleges across the board, across different minority groups. So that's very exciting. And we're going to break it down here by race and gender. So we saw Asian female have the highest increase in voting rates. And Black female have the lowest increase. That's because Black female have historically turned out to vote at a very high rate. Okay. So it's not that they didn't turn out as much, but they already turned out to vote at a very high rate. If anyone wants to slow down and look at these bunch of pictures. I should use another chart on this one, but it just breaks down your population share of Texas and of students in Unsolved. So across the board, we saw pretty much stable or increase in certain minority groups and other groups decrease. And one of the things we really focus on, as Rachel mentioned earlier in her student handout, is STEM students do not turn out to vote as much as other students do. So during the history of Unsolved, what we found is students in the social sciences turn out to vote more. As you can see on this chart, so library science, theology, religious, vocation, and public administration turn out to vote at a higher rate in 2016, and very similarly in 2020 as well. And I have heard, I went to a college once for a workshop, and a student, I think he was in econ or a business major. He was like, well, this economist said you're voting this, my vote doesn't count, so that's why I'm not going to vote as an econ major. Like, they don't understand the impact of not voting, because they're like, well, this is what I'm studying, I'm going to go into this field. like no matter what I do, like in voting or not voting, it's not gonna impact me, that it does impact them even at the local level, not the national level. Thank you. So now that you get your reports, what do you do? What do you do with this? We get this question asked all the time. What do I do with my Unsolved report? My voting rate is not great. Like, how can I make it better? So that, and I'm sure that you guys have heard from everyone today, and I hope you get, understand the lessons they said. It's just, and you have heard the same thing pretty much over and over again. It's the collective efforts of everyone on your college campus. And a couple of years ago, we were granted this grant to go do a climate study. So we picked out campuses with really high voting rates and campuses with really low voting rates, some of the outliers. We went there to do a climate study on the campus. We asked what are they doing wrong or what are they doing right? And we found that on colleges with really high voting rates, what they value is political learning across their curriculum, which includes civic rights and how to vote. So not just talking about voting, but teaching students how to vote and what are the mechanisms of how to vote. I remember my first time voting when I was 18 at college. I show up to a polling location and had no idea what to do. I was terrified. And I'm sure you guys are in a much better place than I am right now. Just hearing how you spoke today and the fact that you're here. So you're a lot more educated than I am in this space. And I had no idea what an absentee vote was. I went to school in Connecticut and I'm from Massachusetts. So my roommate was from New Mexico. She's like, oh, I'm gonna fill an absentee ballots and all stuff. I've never heard of that before. Like I was never taught that. That was never taught in school for me. And we also talk about breaking down the equalization, including free speech and academic freedom. So again, to the earlier presentation by Dr. Ripov, so you have to be able to talk about politics on college campuses. And this is not about an us versus them. And again, going back to the student panel earlier, just talking to your peers. When you ask them, hey, do you vote this election? Or like, why do you vote? Don't tell them they're wrong. Or tell them like you're a bad person for not voting. Ask them, why do you vote? Ask them what matters to you and tell them the importance of voting or not voting, and try to meet someone where they are and don't just yell at them, but bark at them what they should be doing. And then we found that diversity and inclusion, social cohesion, and welcoming campus climates. So on these campuses, they really form a community with their students. Again, it's not a you versus me and us versus them. They really foster a sense of community for their students and how like their family. One of the campuses that was visited by the team was, it's a small school in Florida and like very artsy. And the school was going to repaint one of the buildings. And they held a space for students to come and ask students, what do you want? What do you want this to be? Or what color do you want? Today, wants everyone's input and opinion, and they take that into considerations. And then we also found that on these campuses, there's a huge student activism, leadership, and political agency, and election season activities and voting. So we found that on these campuses, there is no time period that they focus on voting. Voting is an all-year-round work for them. They never stop working. It's just like when they're like leading up to the election, like we should focus on this, we should focus on that. No, for them, it's an all-year-round work. And I know that because I work with campuses and I get emails from staff in student activities or student engagement space, like, hey, can I have my Unsolved report? I want to see what our voting rates are. Or do you know when the Unsolved reports are coming out? So I can look at my report and like they plan a whole year based on the Unsolved reports. And just really build that as part of their work. And in 2020, it's a pandemic and everyone went home. Like, what do we do? Like, how can we help campuses? So we re-released Election Imperatives 2020. And we also provide with an equity checklist, and we gave specific recommendations for senior leaders, faculty members, academic affairs, and students. And if you would like to see the entire election imperatives, you can go onto our website, and on our website there are a lot more resources as well. Okay. So on the equity, how to close the equity gap checklist, we want you to check in, cultivate and communicate, design interventions, ask who is missing from the room. So when you get your Unsolved reports, we want you to look beyond the top line numbers. Like, oh, like we have this many students registered, we have this many student voted. Really look at these subsequent pages. Look at the breakdown of race, of gender, by class year, by age group, by a few studies. Ask who is showing up, who's there, who's voting, why are you voting at a higher rate than other students? And then actually a checklist is how will you make decisions? And are there power dynamics in a room that should be addressed? Like, how comfortable are you in a group? Identify language and terms, learn to spot statements, examine issues of access, provide language assistance. So if you are on a campus with students from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of languages spoken, make sure that you have ballots available in different languages. So I was a poll worker in the 2020 election. The city that I lived in had a pretty high Asian population, but they only cater to one group, so there were polls, so there were ballots in Chinese, Mandarin, and there were no ballots in Vietnamese, and that's also a pretty high Vietnamese population. So I speak a little bit Vietnamese, and I got so many people like, hey, look, come here, I'm like, oh, where's this person? Like, what's that person? And like, they don't really understand what is on the ballot, they just want to get in and out, and that's it. And also going back to language, if you need assistance to the polling locations, someone to help you fill it out, you can bring someone with you. I know a lot of people are aware of that as well. So if you need assistance, you can bring it, just cannot fill it out for you. And stay creatively involved. Everyone connected. Again, going back to building a community on campus or within a classroom. And like Eddie said, take time to celebrate. Cassie, was it, when was your review party, your pizza party that you sent us a video? Was that 2018?
Oh yeah, that one was the 2018 results.
Okay. Yeah. That was really exciting. Again, like we're not always on college campuses, we don't know what you guys are up to. So it's great to get pictures or videos that you guys send in of what you're done. And make sure everyone has access to different services, including remote options for care, mental health, and staffing for diverse student populations. So how can we connect campus data to action? So these are just some of the recommendations that we are providing you. It's like tools to help you use our data and make them work for your campus. There are so many different factors of what makes things work on your campus, so we really rely to you to know what works on your campus or not. So these are some tools to help you out. So make sure you lean on the election imperative series. Ensure that institutional leaders meet and discuss the reports that catalyze action. I have heard from a couple of people here that they don't have access or is having a really hard time accessing their Unsolved data from their campus leadership. So if you are fall into that category, so we always send Unsolved reports to your president and the head of IR. And usually the third person is someone who works in student engagement or civic engagement. So reach out to those folks on your college campus. If you still are having a hard time, again, just email me up the email contact back end. Our goal is to have campuses share their Unsolved reports with everyone, but that's not always the case. A lot of them, they don't want to show that they did do a good job or their voting rate is low. It's like, well, there are different factors that affect that number, so we don't want them to hide that from the students. I'm sure students like you are going to ask who you are interested in creating something to help foster a better environment for students to get out there and vote. And create and charge a coalition responsible for the Voting Plus mandate. Connect voting with students, political learning, discourse, inclusion, and agency and leadership. Train students in the arts of political discussion focused on inclusion. Again, creating a space where students can talk about politics without being political, of being bipartisan. Designate a data steward. So we want someone to look at the data and make sense of the data as well, and not just look at the number and it's like put it away. Display the data again, making sure that your leaderships are displaying and sharing the data with everyone on campus. Share the reports and faculty across discipline and diverse student groups. Train faculty in discussion-based teaching. I guess let's go back to why we break it down by different field studies. As we mentioned earlier, STEM students tend to vote less than students in social sciences, and we want faculty members to talk about these things in their classroom because faculty members do have the most face-to-face interactions with students. Identify and focus on students with low voting rates. So again, go back to reports, look at it, your students' voting rates, ask why these students are not turning out to vote and what barriers do they have. Convene campus-wide dialogues and reports, generate a report card, and bring us in to get unstuck. So we, in addition to, again, we provide a lot of resources. In addition to the reports, we also hold workshops for campuses. We do dialogue trainings and all of that. Thank you. So again, these are some of the resources that we have on our website. Feel free to go on them, they're free. We'll try to keep it free for everyone. All right. So stay in touch. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at edg@tufts.edu. I manage all the Tufts email accounts, so I will get your emails if you sign us. And that's it. Any questions?
Questions from the chair? Yeah. Oh, we do have a question over here.
Also, if you're a fellow, you read election imperatives as part of discussion block 1. You're already ahead.
Should I be quizzing people?
I'm a little nervous about that.
So one of the things I think we've struggled with in using our Unsolved report is the way that some of the things are categorized. So I think particularly fields of study and there's another one that now I've lost. And so do you have recommendations for how we can sort of parse what sometimes are really large categories that don't necessarily reflect, say, what the majors are at our own institution, and how to sort of put the data we have there in conversation with what we know about our own space?
Yeah, so if we report on all field studies and some institutions, I think there are also like over 2,000 field studies. Everything they would get reported to the clearinghouse. I can give you a more detailed chart, but also it's like also grouped by what is on the report. So do you have different schools on your campuses that maybe work particularly with the school instead of the more like departments? Does that?
We don't really,
So we're a liberal arts school. There is a liberal arts and sciences and humanities field of study that we had 400 and something people enrolled in, but I don't know what that means, right? It's not the whole school.
Yeah, so usually that is for underclassmen. So when they first come in, I'm just give an example, I guess. So when they first come in, they're undeclared and they get categorized as like liberal arts, and then as they get older, I'm sure like by sophomores, junior to declare a major. So those are probably students who get categorized in that group. And again, it's really challenging for us to do field studies, because if you're a double major, we can only pick one, so we cannot report on two others that are double counting you. So your schools will report if you're an econ or poli-sci, and your schools will report those two majors to the clearinghouse. When it gets coded to us, only one comes through. So it is, we try our best to report on that, but again, it's just too much to report. So my best guess for liberal arts is underclassmen who have not declared and they were declared. Yeah.
So what are some ideas that you've seen universities utilize this data in regards to like increased numbers and increased participation? I know something that we did in our institution, the COVID like shut it down, was that we were going to host voter registration drives in every single college that we saw was low in numbers. So the School of Business, the College of Sciences, and all that good stuff. However, like, have you seen anything else contrary to that is utilized to increase these numbers?
So what a lot of schools did during COVID was they built student registration as part of class registration to make it a little easier during COVID. So I guess instead of like having them show up like table like you make it where you sign up for classes. And I know like it doesn't always work for every state. Again, like we only see some cases at work that might not always work for campuses. Sorry, that was not a good answer to your question. But yeah, people get creative. I've heard a lot more building voting registration as part of their class registration. And it was tough. It's not easy when you have students who are at home or it's hybrid and they're not engaged, not showing up, they might take like a semester off. But we didn't see, we couldn't tell if there's going to be a decrease or not. But I know across the country there was about 1 million students decrease in like college students enrollment. So I'm sure that didn't help that number. But sorry, I'm sure like these folks here have better ideas of what they did. And that's why it's so hard working with Unsolved data is we send reports to campuses and we hope that you opened your email and utilize the reports. But we don't hear any feedback of what campuses did. We don't have like a plan, like I know the on-campus democracy challenge, like once you is part of the challenge, you submit a plan and you have like follow-up. Unfortunately, we don't. We keep it free and we want to continue keeping it free to campuses. It's a resource and we want you to utilize it without any restrictions. But again, that's the drawback of not having any follow-up. Once in a while we'll email campuses like, hey, like what have you done? Uniquely on your college campus, like please share with us. And we also don't get like a huge response rate. But that is a common question we get. Like, so what are you doing with my Unsolved reports? Like, well, these are some programs that folks told us they did and it worked for them. And so we're willing to share with you, but again, that might not always work on every campus, depending on your state laws.
I have a question about voting method. I don't remember if you covered it, I'm sorry about that, but I know referencing experimentation on my campus, we've always seen, let's see, A lot of early voting has like been a really good utilized and not as much voting by mail. I was curious if you saw this trying to continue in 2020, and I guess how much stock will be taken that going forward as campuses come back. Do you think the 2020 data will be helpful in that respect and it'll actually show a trend? Or do you think it's kind of an outlier because of the pandemic and when students are back on campus, trends will return to like 2016?
So that is kind of a tricky question. I think Texas does provide voting methods, but that is not provided by all states. So I think in terms of Texas, I don't know, I think the majority of your student population is in state, so there will be likely less absentee voting. It also depends on what future voting laws will be like, because that's a new one in like an office like every different week, so it's hard to keep track of. But we hope it continues to grow in person and vote by mail. But I know like some states only made like special conditions for COVID, and they're reverting back to their ways before, so that might not be the trend ever. Again, I don't know. A lot of people ask like what other chances we're going to see in 2024. We don't know the answer to that yet. Like, you know, like because there was different administration before, and then 20 means we want a different change in administration. Is that trying to continue? Do you want to keep the same administration? Do you want to kick this current administration out? So that could be a total change.
Great, sorry about that tough question. Thank you.
Oh no, not having a lot of good answers today. Very tough questions.
I'm gonna ask a question really fast and then I'll pass it over to you. And we have a chat question as well. I am a self-proclaimed fangirl of IDHE, which I think you guys all know. And so in talking to some of my friends there, I thought there are things that we can do to help support y'all. And so if you could maybe talk a little bit more about some of the things that we as campuses that are using your data can do to be helpful for IDHE, I think that would be awesome.
We ask that you really like share what you do on campus with us and share your reports within your community. Ask your administrator to really embrace the reports as well. Share our resources, bring us onto your campus. We always want to come out and speak to you guys during workshops in addition to just giving a presentation. More funding would always be helpful as well. We always want to provide more resources to you guys. Funding is a restriction that we're facing. And a lot of time we also want to provide you with more data, but because the natural of the Excel data, we can't. We have to get special permission from the clearing house. The data we use for this study, we get contact by campuses all the time. We have such a great database. Can we use it? I'm sorry, we can't provide that to you. But if you want to help us out, share our reports, talk to us, bring us onto your campus, and just use our resources. And we're always looking for people to come and bring ideas to us, working relationships as well.
So I'm from the Texas A&M campus, and we were on the Unsolved campus search. I saw that we weren't reauthorized for the 2018 to 2023 period. What exactly does that entail? Like, we still have access to the 2018 and previous years, and if we were to get reauthorized, we then have access to 2020 or only subsequent elections.
Is that what campus you're from?
Texas A&M University.
I'm pretty sure you're in a study. Yeah. That do you look up your school on the website or?
I went on the IDHE campus search and said that we weren't reauthorized, but we were authorized
previously. Okay. Let me double check for you. But if you aren't authorized right now, and if you want to sign up in the future, you can receive that data. So if, I'm pretty sure you are a guide, so I can confirm that. But if you want to sign up at a campus, is not currently in Australia and you would like to sign up, we can provide you with data for previous years. It's just not going forward, you can also go back. So.
And then if I want, or I as a student can't go, but might be able to go to the registrar and like be able to ask them if we could do it, or does it have to come from, is it recommended that it comes from faculty or?
Typically it has to come from the president, director of IR, or anyone at the VP level. So for example, if you work closely with the student activities office, maybe the VP of that office can sign up for you.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
What office are you with right now, or do you work closely with anyone?
No, I don't. I was just trying to figure out or get an idea of how I even go about doing that. I don't think, I know one big issue we have at our campus is like not having access to data, especially in regards to voting. I know that we'll be able to do a lot more campus initiatives if we have access.
If you work with anyone, even like a coordinator, maybe you can go to their boss or like dean of students, just ask them like, hey, look, this is a project that's free, this is voting data, can we sign up? It's no cost to them, it's not any additional work. Again, like this work is already being done by the registrar's office, and they just have to sign a form that allows us to access that data.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, come find me later, like, confirm if you're still wants to go through all that channels, we can stay here.
The Campus Vote project helps a lot of schools navigate that process. And I had to do some weird stuff at UT to make it happen, so what you thought? Any other questions?
Can I get you guys back?
And you know I'm gonna ask for another round of applause. That was a lot of information. So, with that being said, let me make sure I don't have to speak back here. So I do want to thank all the day's presenters, and I also want to, for our virtual folks, you can throw it in the chat. For you all, I want you to really think about, you know, your main takeaways from today. There was a lot of information shared throughout the day. Thank you for sitting through, taking it in, absorbing it. Make sure as people share emails, even the emails you have from our team, if a question springs to mind later, if you are, y'all, my mind is weird. It's like has a bunch of tabs open at all times. And I could be eating dinner later and think about something that I heard at 11. I have a question. So feel free to still send those questions to our speakers or even to us. A lot of you have my email because I was sending you all bunches of emails. So even if you're like, Bianca, is there a way you connect me with Eddie, with you, with, you know, about a question I have about this? Feel free to do so, whether it's this weekend, next week, after finals are over and you're like, I had another question, I have an idea for Cassie said something and I want to, please reach out if you have those things. But I just want to thank all the day's presenters for sharing their time, for sharing all this information, for your engagement both here and online. That was pretty fun. We were seeing the chat light up as we were in here talking as well. So we love that. We thank you for your patience as we've been navigating everything in systems and navigating this hybrid summit that we are so happy that has gone, I believe, pretty successfully. And just also, I want to give a few reminders though before we break for the day and everything else. I do want to remind you, day 2, tomorrow, will not be here. Everyone should receive a full agenda in your emails. You also have one in your folders, a physical copy here. Those of you online, your Zoom link does not change. You come to the same room tomorrow and we will get you where you need to be. So for our online participants, we'll see you in the same Zoom with the same link that you received. So you don't have to email to say, where's the day 2 link? You have it. Just so you know. For those of you that are in person, we will be at the Thompson Conference Center on day 2. There will be some breakfast and light things served. There will be snacks, there will be lunch, all that good stuff. There is parking there. It's lot 40. It's supposed to be pretty easy to navigate when you get there. It is free parking there. It is first come, first serve, but I've been told we're the really only big thing going on there. So we should have no problems with that if you are driving yourselves. So just so you know, check-in begins at 8 a.m. with our welcome starting at 8:30. For my team, we'll talk, that means, we'll be there very early. But again, light breakfast will be provided, free parking is available in lot 40. So I just want to let you all know that. You will get new ID badges, so you don't have to worry about having to keep up with your sticker. We will give you another sticker for those that are there. For those of you staying in the hotel, if you have not checked in, you should be able to check in. Your room should be under your name. Some of you know who your roommates are, some of you do not. So, just say hi. Your name and ID should just get you in if you have not already checked in, and let us know if there are any concerns or issues at that time. But I just want to thank you all. We've made it to the end of our first day. So we are very happy to have you here. Again, feel free to reach out. We do, include myself, check our emails. My card is in the front table that also has my cell phone. I will tell you, you have a better chance of getting me texting than calling, because that's today. You see, if people call me, it would be hard for me to answer, but I check my phone almost every single time you see me walking around, moving around, to make sure I don't have any messages. So feel free to email me. And again, my card is on the front table. Feel free to take that, lock it in your phones, text me if anything occurs throughout your time here. And we are happy to have you both virtually and in person in Austin with us. And we can't wait to see you bright and early for day 2. So thank you all, and y'all have an incredible rest of your day, unless there are any more. Cassie has one more announcement for you.
So as many of you saw, there was a lot of pizza when we were getting food earlier, and there's a lot of pizza left over. So Taylor, my husband, is grabbing my car right now on the east side of the Capitol. You'll see a red RAV4. I will kind of sketchily just be handing out pizza. So please feel free to stock up on it. Because I don't know, there's only 2 of us. I have no need for 18 pizzas. So please take some with you. It'll be on the east side of the Capitol. Follow me if you don't know where you're at.
Yeah, just follow this wonderful person right here, and she will make sure. And seriously, don't be ashamed. Take a box, take 2. You want to save on dinner tonight? There you go. Have it. Also, staying at Sheraton, they do actually have microwaves and stuff there too. I found out. On the odd floor. See, shout out to Crystal. That's my fiance for keeping us saying and letting us know. So I'm just letting you know. I have a question. Yes. The first 2 hours is free in the Capitol Garage, and after that, we are not covering parking. Any other questions? I'm gonna hang back for a while too, if you do. All right. Well, you all, like I said, get pizza, enjoy the rest of your time, and see